Hello, audience. Welcome back to another exciting installment of the Arcane Archive presents MetaTalks. As always, we have an incredible episode today. Sammy, would you like to tell the incredible audience what exactly we'll be MetaTalk talking about today?
Yeah, we are going over the wide breadth of content that is Homebrew.
Homebrew! We are doing it, ladies and gentlemen. We're brewing up some nice little cozy home rules and stuff and other things for you today. We're going to go over, to start, we're kind of going to go over what is considered to be like variant rules, like technically not homebrew, as it's still technically suggested or put forth as in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Specifically Chapter 9, Dungeon Master's Workshop. We're going to go over a little bit of those variant rules and things, how me and Sam feel about that. And then from there, kind of going to like maybe branch off or kind of propel from that to like a lot of those are used as almost foundations for a lot of homebrew rules that a lot of tables can use at their table. And from there, we'll kind of just discuss that, some of our personal homebrew rules or ideas for homebrew rules that we like, and maybe even some like homebrew creations such as like spells, items, maybe even classes, and then we might actually check out some other things and homebrew stuff that people have made, like on D&D Beyond, for instance. But with all that being said, Sammy, if we'd like to go ahead and get the people started, let's dive right on into the archive. So, Chapter 9 for your Dungeon Master's Guide, Dungeon Master's Workshop. As the Dungeon Master, you are not limited by the rules in the player's handbook. The guidelines in these rules are the selection of monsters in the monster manual. You can let your imagination run wild, and this chapter contains optional rules that you can use to customize your campaign, as well as guidelines on creating your own materials, such as monsters and magic items. Now, the options in this chapter relate to many different parts of the game. Some of them are variants of rules, and others are entirely new rules that you can apply. Each option represents a different genre, style of play, or both. Consider trying no more than one or two of the options at a time so that you can clearly assess their effects on your campaign before adding other options. So, before you add a new rule to any campaign, you need to ask yourself two very important questions, at least by what the book says. One, will this rule improve the game? And two, will my players like this rule? Now, as for this, I absolutely agree with these two things here. It's like any time that a GM wants to implement or apply a new rule to their campaign or game, I feel like it is absolutely paramount to always ask those questions on if it will truly improve the game, what specifically you are looking to improve in the game, and if your players specifically will like it. Because at the end of the day, that is what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make the game more fun, smooth, immersive, whatever it is that your group likes to do, it's supposed to build and improve upon that. What do you think, Sammy?
Well, I know it says to think, will my players like it? There's a simple way to do that, and that's asking them. Have a session 0. For example, and we'll touch on some of the rules that I think might be interesting to try. I have this grandiose dream of one day running an actual horror campaign. I have never had the opportunity, and every time I seem to, it just falls right through my fingers. I want to try to do one. Now, I've played Call of Cthulhu like a little bit, some other more dark style TTRPGs. I've listened to, read about, etc. There wasn't, obviously, there's people who kind of have this idea of like adding that stuff into D&D. There are some rules that maybe can play into that somewhat, but before I can run that, I have to find people who are willing to give that a try. I can't just say, "Hey guys, make a level 5 character," and we get to the table that day, and it's 10 minutes before the session, and I send everyone a PDF with a bunch of lists of new changes that they're going to have to learn on the fly, and maybe things they weren't expecting, and they didn't make a character that fits in this scenario, and now they have to quickly scramble if they even want to play at that point. So it's very important that you not only look at the rules as something that you find interesting, but find people who are like-minded enough to at least give it a try. The last thing you want to do is throw this into a game and have everyone just kind of like frustratedly dealing with it, because that's not, and as you're going to see, me and Adam aren't going to agree on a lot of these variant rules. we are different people. Now, the reality is, if Adam went up to me and said, hey, I want to try this rule, and I'm like, I don't really like that rule, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And if I don't like it once we play, I'll let him know. But
Yeah,
there is like, again, as we've talked about in so many of these, it's about the social, personal, like, be respectful scenario.
Oh
This
yeah,
applies here as well.
It's all about communication. You know, like
Yeah.
Sammy said, for instance, like having, obviously you always should have a session 0 if you're just starting campaign to establish the expectations of what this campaign is, you know, what you expect, excuse me, to be, right? And for everybody to be honest and open about like, hey, this is the type of game that I'm wanting to play or wanting to run. What do you guys think? Like, let me know. I like you guys. And like Sammy just said, it's like if I come to him and like, hey, I want to try this thing, even if Sam doesn't necessarily initially like it, more often than not, and if he came to me saying the same thing, we would both agree to try it because we also have so much trust and understanding. And there are a lot of things we do agree upon in this game and a lot of other things in life. And so it's like we are willing, because we love and care about each other, because we love to hang out and do this thing together, we're willing to try those things because we do trust that, like, hey, one, it's like, I'm willing to try this, but also because that trust is like, if I don't like this, then I do trust that they will take that into account and we will either try to find a compromise to like do this thing, or we'll try to something else, move on to something else better or whatever. As Sam just said, like in terms of this, all about communication. If you're already running a game and you want to implement something new, that's completely fine. Me and a group of mine did this a couple of times as we were going. It's like, just do a check-in. Do a check-in with everybody and say, hey, there's this other kind of rule. I feel like this kind of, like how we're doing it this way is feeling a little bit difficult or strained, slow, whatever your reasons are. Communicate that to them. So like, I want to give this particular variant or this homebrew rule a try. And we're just going to see how it is. It's not necessarily going to be permanent. It's just something that I want to try out and see how it works to maybe get us to where we kind of want to be. Nothing wrong with that at all. So moving on specifically to that, we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the variant rules and maybe in some of the new rules that the Chapter 9 Dungeon Masters Workshop can provide you. One thing specifically being that I actually really like a lot. Like, this is, I think we talked about this slightly before, and this is something that I've always had a personal gripe with in regards to D&D 5e, but specifically the rule skill variance. Now, specifically what this variant rule is instead of your character getting a set number of skills to choose from either their race, class, or background, your character just gets to have essentially a proficiency in any 2 abilities that you choose. One based off of their class usually, and then another based off of their background. So for instance, if you are like, you know, a wizard, you know, with the background in like Far Traveler, or even like what is the one where you're really good at like foraging for food and stuff
Outlander?
like that? Outlander, thank you. You would essentially most likely be able to choose for, and they specifically do have a list for the proficiencies by class. So for instance, like barbarians, you can say they get proficiencies in strength, dexterity, or wisdom, one of those 3. They can just get, you just get proficiency in every skill associated with that ability, right? You just are good at anything that requires strength, dex, or wisdom. Like, you just are good at that. For wizards, you get intelligence or wisdom, which again makes sense. Those are their, you know, primary, your mental abilities and your acuity, all that stuff makes sense on why you could be proficient in either of those abilities. And essentially, if you took intelligence as a wizard, you know, you would be proficient in arcana, history, religion, investigation, and I think that's it for all of intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Those 4, you would just be proficient in all of that, which again, to me, and Sam can probably do the devil's advocate because he doesn't necessarily agree. He doesn't like this particular variant, but I do, because I feel like it vastly simplifies a lot of things in a good way, where it's just like, it makes sense to me, because it's like, as a wizard, as somebody who is just learned, who has a mind, who intelligence being their primary stat, like, you're just gonna be good at recalling and remembering things. Like, and a lot of these abilities, or rather, I'm sorry, skills such as such as history and religion, I feel like overlap a lot. Because all religion is just like, oh, you have the ability to recall about, specific things related to religious stuff. Well, you could make an argument that you could also recall that same information with history. So at that point, what is actually the real difference between the two? And same thing with religion. You could be like, oh, you remember historical things about more religious based stuff. So you could still technically do that anyway. And so basically, and the fact that your intelligence is so high, it's like, hey, why wouldn't you be proficient in recalling information about any of this stuff or doing other things that require you to utilize your intelligence? That's kind of how I feel about it. What do you feel about this, Sam?
Well, the concept is cool. The fact of the matter is that you can, if say you're playing at a table where you have people that are maybe new to playing or don't know what everything does, this will definitely simplify it to a point. You do lose out on certain things like expertise, and to me,
you can still apply it. It's just a little bit. It's a little bit less in certain ways.
It's weird. The way I look at it, and the reason I like the way that it's already done, is because you have to make choices. You have to be like, hey, you get to pick from 4 skills, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on your class and background. Those are the things you're good at. There are certain classes that give you other options. There are certain feats and racial traits that'll give you other options or more options. The reality is like you're gonna have to pick a couple of things that you're better at, and your stats will back up some other stuff, and the rest you're kind of middling to okay at, or bad if you have negative stats. And to me, I like that aspect of D&D. One, because not everybody's gonna be good at everything. I don't think someone who studies history their entire life should be able to also recall every other intelligence-based thing. To me, they are different. In the sense of like, if I need someone to make you were talking about this before we started, and so I'll bring it in because I think it's a good point. You were talking about, he's like, well, call for an intelligence check. That's a great way of doing things, in the sense of like, I need you to see if you can recall any information about this thing, roll an intelligence check, and someone will be like, well, I'm proficient in this one, but not this one. To me, you're basically saying, well, you're proficient in all of them, so roll a straight intelligence check. For me, I'd be like, well, I need someone who's good at intelligence, like say as a DM. I would ask, if you're proficient in an intelligence skill, roll. Based on what skill it is, you'll get different information. You might not get what you're looking for, but you'll learn something. And so I look at checks differently than I think a lot of DMs use checks, which we've talked about before.
And I like that way of thinking too.
So the fact of the matter is, because I use it differently, I don't like this.
Yeah.
There is one piece of this entire block of text that I do like. Is the fact that your background proficiency can be, what's the word? Not debated.
Well,
you can choose to make a case
applicable. Like, and
yes.
I think we have talked about this and some other things as well in regards to the aspect of role play being applied to the mechanics of your character, right? And it specifically states here in terms, like Sammy just referenced, in background proficiency, that this particular rule, like, characters don't have skill or tool proficiencies, just whatever. It specifically says anything that would grant the character a skill or tool proficiency provides no benefit, but instead a character can add his or her proficiency bonus to any ability check to which the character's prior training and experience, reflected in the character's background usually, can reasonably be applied to. Now, the DM is the ultimate judge of whether the character's background does apply or not. However, the player of a character, like, they can make a proclamation or a thing of being like, hey, and it gives an example here. So you know what? I'll just use that. The player of a character with a noble background, for instance, could reasonably argue that the proficiency bonus should apply to a charisma check the character makes to secure an audience with a king or a nobleman, or even to like navigate court-like areas or whatever. The player should be encouraged to explain in specific terms how the character's background applies. You can't just simply say, well, I'm a noble, and then get that bonus necessarily, but instead say, hey, I spent a number of years before, like, starting my adventuring career, serving as my family's ambassador to court or other noble gatherings, and this sort of thing is basically second nature to me now. which is like, yeah, it's like, you know what? Hey,
Yeah.
that is a reasonable
Like-
thing I'd say to be able to apply your bonus to then. Like,
I like that
yeah.
with the old system. Add that into the old system.
But that's but a lot of people
I know, but the reason I say that, and I know, but that's why we're doing this, Adam. We're trying to show people the glory of doing things maybe a little bit better. The reality is
different.
Different.
Maybe not better.
Well, no, I think it is. This one, I will die on that hill. that I think, because let's look at something. For example, let's say you're making a fighter. We'll go with something boring for the sake of simplicity here.
Okay.
You're making a fighter.
Uh-huh.
Your background is in some form of, noble. We'll go with noble because it's easy. There, some form of noble court or high society, but your character is not particularly charismatic. They are a fighting class, but maybe like when they were younger, they spent a lot of time there, or they actually did work under someone in that court. So they understand how all of this works, but they didn't have the natural aptitude that, say, someone with a high charisma and high intelligence would, but they know how all of this works. You didn't spec into charisma. You didn't spec into high intelligence. You're a fighter. You spec to be a fighter. The reality is that as a DM, if I look at your backstory and I think to myself, well, they know how this works. And you come to me like, hey, I've done this before. I should be proficient in this specific case. Me as a DM, I would give that to you. This is a good point of that. The rest of it, I don't really agree with as much. But I like the fact that you can make a case as like, hey, I know my charisma is like a 12. I don't have proficiency in persuasion, but I'm comfortable in this scenario, and like these people know who I am. They should know that I understand what I'm doing here. And to me that makes sense. Because you have a limited skill set in terms of in raw D&D 5e, there is a limited amount of things unless you play a skill monkey class like Bard or Rogue, you just have less proficiencies.
Or even just skills to choose from overall.
Yeah,
like
you just have less skills. Obviously now with the customizable background that's changed, but the reality is that you do have less options and like less. You have to pick what's going to make your character viable for the most part, unless you want to just do whatever the fuck you want. But to me, this gives you an option of saying like, I want to make a character that's viable, but this is a really important part of my backstory, and I should be able to use that knowledge that my character has. Can I have proficiency in this use case? And I think to me, yeah, some of my DMs have always done things where it's like, well, you know this, have advantage. It's another way of doing it.
I agree, and like, and so here's what I want to say specifically too to what you said before about some of the reasons maybe you don't like it, and we'll see how you feel after I kind of explain my case a bit here. Where in regards to this, like I absolutely agree. I don't feel like anybody should necessarily just be good at everything, like unless like you're like a bard or a rogue who has reliable talent / jack of all trades, whatever. That's an ability you get. That's fine, that's great. But like I feel like, again, specifically with this, for me, one of the biggest things that's always annoying, especially, it's like I feel like this particular variant rule gives you so much more freedom as a party or a character to basically just do kind of what you want to really do, while still in my opinion, I still think providing you with like, you're not going to be great at everything. Because again, there are a lot of abilities that don't even have nearly as many skills as some of the other ones do. Like strength. If you as a barbarian choose strength, it's just going to be athletics checks. That's it. That is the only strength skill that there's there. Con has nothing. Strength only's got athletics, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in a group or a game where people are just like, roll me a strength check. I'm like, okay, athletics or something? I'm like, no, this isn't really athletics. And it's like, well, that's I have proficiency in athletic. Well, like that's the only strength-based skill. So instead ask for a strength check, but it's like, okay, well then what is athletics then? What is the point of that? That this skill now has been wasted because this is not like applicable. Even though you should just be proficient in things that utilize your. If you have like a 18 or a 20 strength, you should just be proficient in that. And I know a lot of time people will ask the question on like, okay, a specific check or thing, and be like, okay, what skill would that be to ask for a check to do this particular thing? And it's like, okay, just roll an intelligence check. And with this particular variance, like, you don't have to necessarily worry about that. I agree. I think you could still, technically, if you wanted to, like you said, with getting different types of information depending on what you roll, I think in those situations, you could absolutely still ask for a specific check saying, hey, okay, you're proficient in all of that. That's fine. But depending on what you roll, then you'll get different information. So are you going to do Arcana? Are you going to do religion? Are you going to do history or whatever? You are proficient in all of those, but depending on what you choose, you will still get different information. But it doesn't lower your chances of getting that information. And again, I admit, perhaps I'm a bit biased in terms of like, I am also just a player / GM. I like to give my players, and I like to have the most chance of succeeding to get that story, to get that information, to accomplish that, to progress the narrative and the thing along. I don't understand. I think you've talked about this before too. I don't understand GMs who are like, they combative. Are less, combative or they don't fiend and want to, like, they don't salivate at the idea of giving their characters more information, to see their reactions about things, to have them invested and involved and immersed in the story. And so I feel like this maximizes the chance. It doesn't automatically mean that they'll succeed, even with their proficiency bonus, depending on like, whatever, like, they might still not, they could still fail. They could still roll shitty and fail. And I'm a testament to that as well.
Yeah.
But I feel this simplifies a lot of problems that I have seen as well as experienced myself in games where people are too hung up on the specific skills that apply and are far less, because the rules don't explicitly state, hey, you can apply your proficiency to this. You only have these things. You can't be proficient in anything else. Even though for me, it's like, well, I think I gave the example before, like to take a druid, for instance, right? I don't, like, no matter what, I feel as a druid, if you have taken all this time to become attuned to nature, you've lived out in the wild, you've done all this stuff, like, I can't see any legitimate reason why you would not be pretty equally proficient in survival, animal handling, medicine, perception, maybe not insight, maybe. But even with that, insight is less of like, it's usually even being able to, you could make a case of saying insight is like, well, even if you're not as like able to identify more like physical or more intellectual characteristics of a person like tells, you just even have like a sixth sense about a person where you're just like, you can just kind of tell or get a weird vibe. You don't know for sure what that is. You don't know what they're actually thinking or what they're saying, but you still just be like, something about this doesn't feel right. Even that, it's like, I don't see any reason why a druid character like that couldn't reasonably be pretty good at all of that stuff.
Okay, so like, yes, I get what you're saying. I do have to make the point that nature is still an intelligence check.
It is, even though it doesn't make sense.
I've explained why I feel like it does. And we've talked about it before. The reality is that you look at intelligence, wisdom, charisma less so, but dex as well. Those three stats mainly have a menagerie of skills associated.
Mostly there is not like
to I guess in charisma as well. But to me, the reason I don't like this is because I don't think every person is going to be good at every skill associated with every ability score. In my opinion, I don't like it.
That's fair.
I think it's wrong.
That's fair. I understand that too, because I agree.
Because I don't think that you need to be good at all those things to be.
Oh no!
Like, you can have a high wisdom, or like say you have a high charisma, and you could be okay at lying. Because not everybody's good at lying just because they're good charisma. Like, I don't like what this does. But I don't like what this does in that sense of making it all the same role, because I just don't think that to me takes away from the game. To you, it adds. To me, it doesn't.
Well, for instance, okay, let me ask you again in regards to charisma. It's like, can you reasonably say that a person who is good at telling the truth or convincing a person they're telling the truth could not potentially be just as good at deceiving a person or even intimidating?
They can be if they get proficiency in it. But to me,
all it is at the end of the day is just convincing, like the ability to convince someone of what you want to convince them, whether it be the truth or a lie or whatever. It's all it is at the end of the day is that one concept of being able to because again, don't get me wrong, I can absolutely see the distinction of being like, hey, here's an example. a person's like, hey, when you know something is true, you have this ability to be like, this is the truth. I am being truthful. But when you know something is a lie, you could be like, I have a weird moral thing where I'm like, I don't like to lie. I'm not good at lying.
It's not even just
I'm
that.
not like, so I could even see it like that.
Charisma
like,
isn't just the ability to talk. It's
no,
presence.
It's your force of will. Yes,
it's your force of will. So like, for example, a honest to goodness holy paladin has high charisma, is good at persuading people. It's not just because they talk good. It's because their entire aura and their entire being when they walk up to you is someone that is the pinnacle of, I will place my trust in this person. Whereas there's nothing saying that they can't also lie. But it would be a completely different, to me, those are two so different things within one ability that I don't think the other one would work for me. It would take away all the fun I had building a character. It would take away all the fun I have in my head trying to figure out which one makes more sense. Because there's also the fact of, like, in a lot of skill checks, if your DM is at least willing to listen for a second, you can make a case to use things that they might not originally ask for. You know, your use case of, like, people saying, I want a strength check, and you're like, can I use athletics? I think if you're a good DM, you just ask for athletics. Because if you read what athletics does, that's what you're asking for. The only time you should be asking for a strength check, if it's for, like, a magic item that specifically says that because it wants to make it harder, or like a trap that is, no, even traps, no. Use the proficiencies.
Yeah.
I'd say, like, a very specific curse, spell, or magic item that specifically talks about things like a baseline dex check, a baseline strength check. I think that's okay. In every other scenario, that's what these proficiencies are there to advent, to help.
I 100% agree.
So for me, like, in my experience, I've never had to roll a strength check.
Yeah, that must be nice. Yeah.
No, it's because I also make my own case. I, as a player, am like, they're like, make a charisma check. I'm like, persuasion? And they're like, well, how do you want to go about doing this? Do you want to be mean? Do you want to be conniving? Do you want to be persuasive? Let's look at what, you know. So for me, when you give everything the same role, that takes away so much in my head. Now, I understand where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from, and I get it. I don't.
No,
like,
I
can't.
I see where you're coming from too, and
like,
I agree. I get it as well. I mean, like I said, I guess for me, it is
too gamey for me.
I mean,
there's not enough individuality at that point.
But what I'm saying to you is, again, is like, if you're willing to take the baseline rule specifically and then technically apply homebrew concepts and ideas and the more stuff anyway, why not just simply make this the baseline and then apply the more specific stuff in order to have that flavor anyway? Because that's literally what we've been telling people to do this whole time anyway.
Yeah, but not this one.
Why not just make it easier baseline so that your GM or whatever else doesn't have the ability to be like, well, we're going to play more rules as written. To be fair, this also is a variant rule. This isn't even the thing that is rules as written. So your GM could still make the case about being like, well, we're going to do this. Because like I said, just because you might have proficiency in everything involved with that one ability doesn't mean that you will get, first of all, doesn't guarantee that you will make the check to get the information you want. It also does not change the fact that you can still ask them to be like, okay, what specific path do you want to take in order to get to this point? You have all these different paths, and you don't feel restricted or restrained to going one specific way that might even prove to not even be helpful or whatever. You know what I mean?
To me, that's part of the game. To me, I like the fact that you can be good at something that does not apply in this scenario, and you have to figure out who can help you or how, or what other way to go about it.
That can only really be applicable highly on if your GM is willing to do that and run with you.
I mean, like, if you come up to say, okay, we've used this story before. You come to a ruin, you have nobody can get through the magic door.
Yeah.
Right? And we've talked about, well, you can dig through around it. You can try to break the door down.
Mm-hmm.
You can try to find the switch. If you can't find the switch, you can try to dispel the magic. If you can't dispel the magic, you leave. To me, this gets rid of that, because then anyone who specs into intelligence can make this check. Whereas before, if you were good at investigating, but you're not, let's say you're good at history, but you're not good at investigation or arcana, this door, unfortunately, you might not find anything about unlocking it.
Is beyond you. Yes.
But there is always, like, you can always go find someone to help you open the door. There's always other ways to do it. I don't.
There's only other ways to do it to the extent that your GM provides and allow. And my point being is, I love the fact that the vast majority of your experience, you have been able to have that kind of flexibility and freedom, and even
sometimes, not every time,
but still, even amount that you can have that. But I'm simply telling you, like, this. My argument for this is specifically that I feel like it should be more widely applied as even like a normal thing, because it gives, again, it doesn't restrict having that thing about being like, hey, you might not be able to do this thing. Because again, once more, to be fair, unlike having 4 separate or however many proficiencies, you only get proficiency technically in 2 abilities. And once more,
like either.
if you choose, depending on what you choose, you'll get vastly less than you might get if you actually just take the normal thing, maybe.
Which is why I don't like it.
But I feel like
it pigeonholes you based on your class and background, whereas
the game does that anyway in a ton of ways. Like it's the same thing, only this just gives you a little bit more. Well,
not anymore. Because now with customized backgrounds, it doesn't.
I mean, but those are technically still optional, though.
Again,
but not actually.
So is this. So either way, you have to talk to your DM. But
exactly,
my problem is it takes away too much individuality to the character, in my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. Like I said,
I'll leave it there because I understand why you like this. You understand why I don't.
Disagree, but we can leave it there, and we can absolutely move on.
I will say this, Adam, and to your comment of like, well, fortunately for you, you've played at tables where it allows you to do this. You know why I'm doing this with you? The whole MetaTalks thing in general is to make more tables like that.
Yeah, exactly.
We do the deep dives because we like being nerds.
Yeah.
This is me being nerdy.
Oh, absolutely. We're trying
to the advantage of someone else.
We're trying to be constructive for all those other people, to give them maybe another point of view and a vibe to maybe have some perspective.
Yeah, my dream is someone who wants to play this game, reads stuff up, watches a video from us, and is like, I want to be the positive influence on my players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's why I do this. So
100%. Me too. That's why we started this. That's why we're like, hey,
in my ideal world, this rule wouldn't have to exist because your DM isn't a shithead.
I agree, and I would hope for that to happen. But my point being is the unlikelihood of that is high. And so in that particular thing, it's like, hey, here's something that any aspiring new GMs, feel free to try to maybe apply this. And then, as Sam said, though, try to keep within the confines. If you utilize this, it does simplify things and makes it a little bit more across the board in certain ways. But then make sure to still apply that more specific aspect to be like, hey, here's some flavorful stuff that you guys can do, you know? And obviously, this is more my opinion as well. Me and Sam, cannot say this enough and preface enough. These are all just our personal feelings and opinions on these things. We're not saying any of this is the gospel truth or any of this is like the right way to play.
No.
People can play however they want to play so long as they are having fun. The only right way to play is to have fun and have a good time. But we will move on now from that, specifically to another interesting kind of idea. And I've seen a number of tables implement this, both like that I've kind of been a part of, but that I've just seen others do, and that is the concept of hero points. Now, hero points are essentially things that you can bequeath to your party and I've seen them in different forms and styles where it's like you can give them to your party in terms of like they're like the lucky feat, where you give them the ability to re-roll like once per roll on an ability check, saving throw, an attack roll, or whatever. You can also use it to maybe like in terms of the examples they give here. It's like hero points work well in epic fantasy and mythic campaigns, in which the characters are meant to be more like superheroes rather than just the average adventurer. So essentially, like a player can spend a hero point whenever he or she makes an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, and the player can spend the hero point after the roll is made, but before any of its results are applied. Spending the hero point allows the player to roll a d6 and add it to the 20, possibly turning a failure into a success. A player can only spend 1 hero point per roll. So with this particular rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide, it's not just like you roll another d20. It's specifically that you get to roll like a bardic inspiration almost to help you and to hopefully like add on to your roll.
I mean, this is like, hey, do you want to feel like powerful in high fantasy?
Yeah, or do you want
like this?
You want to increase your chances of like not failing into like whatever, and you can only you get like, it basically says like a character starts with 5 hero points at first level. Each time the character gains a level, he or she loses any unspent hero points and gains a new total equal to 5 plus half the character's level. So you get like a shit ton of these too.
But you only get them when you level up. You don't get them new every day.
No.
So you get
not
at
every
the beginning,
rest.
you get 5 hero points, so you hit level 2. Then you get 6. Then you'll get like 6, 7, 7, 8.
Yeah, it'll continuously go up as you level up, and that's nice. And they're limited, and so you might want to use them.
I mean, the reality is like you can only use one per roll.
Yep.
So if you have like a bad string of rolls, you could use them all in one encounter and have none until you level up again. And for some campaigns, that's 2 months down the road.
It's true.
I do think this is something that if you want and this is like some players, they want to do more beer and pretzels, let's roll high numbers and have a couple of drinks, eat some pizza and mess around with dice. You want to feel powerful? Throw this in there. Yeah. I don't to me, I don't see a downside to this, as it's literally just, I want you guys to have a little bit of extra fun, and maybe this will save y'all from a TPK at one point. But once you use them, they're gone until you level up again, and that might be in 4 sessions from
Who
now.
knows? Yeah, and I also agree. Like, I like the application of this in terms of I feel like, again, anything that allows you to kind of add just like and to be fair, once again, it's still, you roll a d6. It's literally just having a bard in the party at a certain level, where you just have a d6 extra roll to the 20. It's not necessarily guaranteed to actually help or whatever, but even having that opportunity is always nice. Again, once more, I can absolutely personally feel this, because again, I'm an infamously low roller. Literally, I was telling Sam, just like the last 2 days, I had 2 games the last 2 days, and I literally rolled both games 2 natural ones in a row. And in one of the games, I rolled a 1, a 2, and a 3. And I was a rogue with like proficiency and expertise, and I failed like a DC 14 like ability checks or whatever. And I was just like, wow. What are the odds of that happening? And so this could have actually potentially helped me.
Gotta love D&D.
Yeah, you gotta love D&D. You know what I mean? It's great. It's like,
you gotta pray. That's why you pray to the dice gods every morning. I think you've been slacking at them.
I haven't, man. Well, no, that's not true. I have been slacking in terms of I have rejected them at this point.
Oh, see, no, I am also am a dice atheist.
They have forsaken me too many times, Sam. I'm an oath
I just
breaker.
don't believe in it.
I am an oath breaker at this point. No. I believe in them.
You're a dice breaker.
It's too. I am been cursed by evil dice gods. Not the benevolent dice gods have forsaken me, and the evil dice gods are trying to claim my soul. Yeah, and I'm not an oath breaker, hell bent on just screwing both of them and being like, I'm making my own fate here at this point.
Yeah, no, I never understood that, but I feel bad for people who roll low.
Yeah. You should. Our existence.
I'm a middle. I roll to the middle,
hard.
Adam.
Hey, the middle at least
well.
is still almost interesting, because it's like you never know what you might do. All right.
I roll
for me,
ways.
I can almost always be like, oh, I rolled. Oh, okay, all right. Well, screw me then. I guess can't do shit for shit. But in essence, everyone.
We like hero points here.
But we
agree on hero points.
Yeah, and
hero
again,
points are fun.
If you don't want to give them the D6, like I said, I've also seen many other places or many other games that have like utilized them as basically the lucky feat, where you re-roll the dice, you get like advantage, or you just get an extra dice to roll. Once again, I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's so busted and broken, but it's like it really isn't. Maybe for certain people who are, again, just like ridiculously high roller, like they just roll high all the time, and then you have
if you have someone who rolls high all the time and you're using physical dice, if you're playing next to them, you should check how they roll. If you're not playing next to them, have them roll online. I have a buddy of mine in one of my campaigns who I love very dearly, who I'm pretty sure rolls a very specific way with his hand and seems to always roll very well and doesn't use digital dice. Now, does he maybe look at it like a game and think of it like, well, I want to be powerful? And is he doing it for the wrong reasons? I don't think so. Me personally, I don't think so. He literally only plays barbarians. So he always just wants to hit things. And there are times where he does roll bad, and there are times where he can't hit things. So I'm okay with it. But reality is that he's the only one who rolls physical, and I know he's probably rolling it funny, or like those people that roll into the crook of their book. They know what they're doing. They're not human garbage, but you should call them out, especially if you're the DM.
Yes, you should call them out. You should make them aware of what they're doing, and that they're aware of what they're doing. And again, like,
as someone who rolled dice into a cigar box for 4 years because they never had a dice tray and had to use the fact that there was a lid to bounce the dice off of to get a full actual random roll because he wanted it to be a real roll. That was a self-imposed bullshit rule. I think, just roll, yeah. If you use random number generators, you can't be completely systematically unlucky. You can be like Adam here and have, for some reason, the random generator gods.
I can literally go. I've been using online dice rollers for this.
Yeah,
Sam. I have evidence. I can literally screenshot this shit.
But
show everybody the evidence that they need it.
But you have been cursed by some otherworldly eldritch being, and most of us are not lucky enough to have that kind of relationship with the cosmos.
Lucky, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
So the reality is something like this baseline is helpful for everyone, and we love it.
I mean, the statistic and probability is the thing that hurts the most. We're just like, how is this even a thing?
Do my favorite thing and give every one of your players lucky at level 1.
Yeah, literally. But that in essence, that's hero points, y'all.
We like hero points.
We like hero points here. I don't think there's anything negative about it really, except obviously if you're wanting to make a more gritty realism camp, and we're gonna get to that in a second.
But you know what? I'm gonna make a case. I think hero points would be you rename them obviously to something cooler and more gritty sounding, but the concept of hero points would actually be really fun for a gritty campaign because most likely your stats start out as lower. Yeah. Things are more difficult.
I agree.
Your rests are more treacherous. And so giving your players a couple opportunities to quite possibly turn the tide in a very horrifying situation, I think is a good addition.
I absolutely agree, Sam. Again, you're forgetting the concept, though, that a lot of DMs who probably would make that kind of thing almost have a sick, twisted desire to not see their players succeed.
No, I want gritty realism. Okay, I'm going to talk about this in gritty realism because I have a very different viewpoint.
Let's
talk about honor.
We're gonna talk about honor and sanity, you guys. That's the next part of the Chapter 9 Dungeon Master's Workshop. If you're running a campaign shaped by a strict code of honor or even some cosmic horror, consider adding one or both of these new ability scores, honor and insanity. These abilities function like the standard 6 abilities, with exceptions specified in each ability below. Here's how to incorporate these option abilities at character creation. If your players use a standard array, you can kind of probably go over the specifics of this. Like, essentially, how they function is they are new ability scores that you can add to your game if you are playing with this mechanic. And they're not like your normal ability scores where you can specifically, like, every level, or not every level up, but whenever you get ability score improvements that you add to them as you go, and they have a specific like effect or function on like a lot of your checks and stuff like that. They do have effects on like your checks and stuff, but they are more almost like tally numbers, where it's like and if you've ever played Call of Cthulhu or any kind of other game like that where you have like attributes where it's like, oh, this can go down or up depending on certain actions or effects and experiences in the game. Honor, for instance, and me and Sam were kind of talking a little bit about this before. Like, personally, I feel like Sam was saying in order for him, as he thought, like in order to use kind of the honor attribute, it would have to be a game where like the world itself, or you have to run it as like a night type of campaign where you're in like a nightly order or something.
My brain did process what I was trying to say a little bit
of
better.
An addendum then added to it.
It's not that I need the world to have an honor code. What I'm saying is, like, if I was a player and my DM walked into the room, we had session 0, and he goes, "Hey guys, I have this great new idea. We're gonna have an honor code in this campaign." Now, for me, the way that you would incorporate that, like, I'd almost want to play where the characters we make are part of some order or society or something where order is a sort of currency. The fact of the matter is that unless you completely overhaul how most things in 5e work, you'd have to really put in a lot of effort as a DM to make order matter, in my opinion. The reality is that I, as a player, would need some sort of physical way to track it for myself. So having a code of honor, something that we can look at and be like, and like our characters are thinking, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Right. Because what I can see is we've talked about shitty DMs. We've talked about, what we always talk about is, unfortunately, some of the experiences mostly you've had. Unfortunately, I love you very much. I'm sorry you have to deal with these horrible things. But
I
to
mean,
me, I feel like
there's certainly worse
if one of
experiences
these,
than others, but you know.
yeah, but like say if one of these DMs that you've talked to me about added honor, I am not confident that that DM is going to use it correctly. And so
Yeah.
with stuff like honor and sanity, I as a player want this to be spelled out for me at the beginning so that no one can go back on their word, because that is
I do agree.
honor.
I
It's
do agree.
honor.
I do agree. And one thing
That
I
was
will
my
say
only
to that,
caveat.
yeah, no, I one thing I will say to that is, again, for me, like, I like this aspect because I do feel, again, but as Sam kind of stated, I feel like, and honestly, it's almost anything in this game. GMs, like,
You have to have accountability.
You have to have accountability. You have to be as fair and reasonable as possible. And it's like I like Sam's again idea of being like, it's fair to basically be like, okay, these are a strict set of rules that I can kind of understand and know how honor is actually applied. I will also say, though, obviously, you know, one could say that honor could be applied in a sense, because again, I kind of counteracted some of Sam's things before saying, like, well, paladins are almost like the best representation of having almost a built-in honor code or system, so to speak. Because, like, you know, at any point, depending, the GM can just be like, oh, well, you're not acting in line with what your oath represents, and so therefore you no longer have your powers, blah. Or even we could maybe say the same thing about clerics too, any religious kind of whatever,
even warlocks.
Yeah, but another thing being too is it's like, okay, well, there is no real clear like thing of like, hey, this is me supposed to be like, because people can even specifically make the argument like, well, I am upholding the tenets of my oath or my deity or whatever in this way that I still feel applies. Like, this is my interpretation of this thing here and there.
Yeah.
Honor obviously does have a same potential to kind of like be there, right? Where it's like with Sam, like, I could say, though, there are some baseline things for honor. Like, I feel like almost honor systems, because we all know about these types of players. They're either like rogues or maybe even, you know, paladins. Like, this,
you go the opposite way, yeah.
Yeah, where it's just like, you know, rogues like to steal things from the party or cause issues or problems, or maybe like a bard is causing issue, but you can be like, okay, well, then your honor points are going to drop, and that can be almost like a physical tally of like, hey, these are some things that you're doing that's dishonorable. If your honor gets too low, you will be, if this character will officially be booted from the party. Like, they can no longer kind of be in the party. They can no longer whatever. Or
that's a harsh thing.
And then, well, you even said if people do that, you would just kick them immediately anyway.
Yeah, I'll have my own piece.
My point.
I don't want to interrupt
you.
No, I feel bad. I shouldn't have said anything.
No. I appreciate you saying that, because again, it's like, my point being is like, it's difficult to sometimes address, even for DMs, whether they're new or whether they're veterans. It can be difficult at times to address.
Morality is so difficult,
and not just that, but even to it, because again, it's like, I feel like any good GM, you want to make your world as immersive and, you know, within reason, like realistic as possible. And like, player agency is great for that. Like, that's the point. You want to have player agency. You want to allow players to be able to make choices and decisions without taking them out of the game, but then still be able to, obviously, those choices and decisions should have consequences and reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Honor system, I feel like, could almost be a way of doing that, in terms of also showing them like, hey, this is a tick. Like, hey,
yeah,
you did something that was clearly dishonorable. And this might even start to have legitimate, and they can even, like you said, Sammy, they have an actual thing that show, because a lot of people might even make this thing of being like, oh, well, I did this thing, why can't I, like, whatever, like I shouldn't be reprimanded for doing this thing. It's like, okay, well, I have actually an in-game system or effect that's like, hey, this shows how people are going to start reacting to you. Now, the lower your honor is, the less likely you are people are going to really believe you. You're going to start getting disadvantage on like checks to either deceive or convince them.
Well, I would
like,
say you get advantage to deceive.
Well, no, because like, people know about you. Your honor is like your notoriety and infamy.
Yeah.
Like, you are known for doing this thing. Because that's even kind of what it says here, is like, honor measures like a character's almost reputation that others know about, especially those who have high honor scores themselves. It's like, this is almost like a reputation score in a way of like, hey, this is showing that you are, and they have these in video games too all the time as well. It's like, if you do bad stuff, your notoriety goes up, your infamy goes up, and sooner or later people are going to start hunting you down. I even say the lower your honor score, the higher chance maybe you get attacked by mercenaries or bounty hunters, potentially looking to like whatever. Like, this is, I feel like, a way for, even less for like GMs, but more so for players who might be having some problematic behavior, to not only see how their behavior and actions have an actual in-game effect and can see it and tally it, but then also even give them a reward. The higher your honor can be applied to social situations to give you bonuses to convincing people of things, or to maybe even trying to gain certain things. People are more willing to accept you, to help you, to assist you. Whatever.
There is one thing I do want to point out, and that's the last tenet of like the honor checks, because this is something like I don't quite understand exactly how all of this goes. Like I'm reading it and like I kind of understand baseline, and honestly, I don't think people are going to use this word for word the way it's written down, as honor is such like a, it's such a like,
well, it's a very subjective,
it's a very subjective concept.
It's a very abstract, subjective concept.
I love the one honor check thing that I like the most is using his or her honorable or dishonorable reputation to influence someone else.
Yes.
Now, the reality is that honor is obviously something to be seen as good, but there are people that are going to have to be dishonorable to get what they need to get done. Doesn't mean those people are bad human beings, but it means that they might have done some unfortunate or unsavory things to get what they wanted, even if it's for something that they think is viable. Now, I want to make a case that the average D&D character that someone is going to play from level 1 to level 20 is most likely around the middle of the honor spectrum. And the reason I say that is because yes, you are going to do things that are overall good. The reality is once a D&D character gets powerful, they start doing things that I think general, non-powerful people might not like so much. But because they're so powerful, there is no way to really do anything about it. And I'm not talking about people who are murder hobos or people who are rampantly thieving everyone in a small town. I'm just talking about the fact that being a powerful character, pretty much doing anything is going to create unfortunate events for people around you. Whether that's attracting monsters to a town, whether so in a non-honor based system, yes, you do good things. The odds are there is going to be some damage you do along the way, which is 100%. Why I would say like if you're going from a 0 to 20 scale, I'd say most D&D characters hover around a 13. Because most people play fantasy games to do something fun, which ultimately ends up being something good. Obviously, evil campaigns are going to be different, but most stories require someone who's going to do something good and selfless. What I worry about with this system, and this is something that I'd like to try, and this is something that you seem very, if we ever play together, I would totally be down to try something like this.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit skeptical because in this situation, there is no way to increase your honor by ability score increase.
No,
it doesn't say you can do that. It is just by actions.
It's about your actions and conduct in the world.
I am curious to see if I can play a morally grayish character that isn't completely destroyed by this system, because as you've talked about, if you get too low on your honor, your character isn't part of the party anymore. I don't disagree with that. I don't think it would work for every table. But the reality is, I think that there is a way to play a slightly dishonorable character that still is out there to do good. Yes, things would be harder for them. As like, look at like Robin Hood, right? Robin Hood steals from the rich, gives to the poor. Technically, I would say, is a dishonorable person. He is a thief. Yes, he uses that money for something good.
He's not dishonorable.
But hear me out.
Okay, sorry.
He is definitely not an honorable person in this morality, because guess what? Half of society isn't going to trust him. Because if you look at, like, obviously he was stealing from just the rich, giving to the poor. In most D&D societies, there is a low class, middle class, high class, royalty. So you're stealing from high class and royalty, and you're giving to some lower born people. There is a group of people in there who aren't going to trust you because you are ostensibly a thief.
It's true.
I'm curious to see how. I'm not saying that this couldn't work, and that's why I like that you're very like, oh no, I like this. Is I would like to see how that works firsthand before I make my call on this not working.
Absolutely. So like
that's kind of where I'm coming from.
No, and I absolutely agree with that, and I love that, because here's the thing, right? Like you said, I 100% love the fact that you said, it's a person, and we can even use specifically the paladin again as the perfect representation of this, because they literally have an inbuilt kind of honor system already just in their whole thing and their backstory.
But not all oaths are great.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For instance, conquest can usually, a lot of the tenets of conquest
or vengeance
are much more. I mean, vengeance can still be a little bit more of that gray line of like, again, like there's literally a superhero team called the Avengers. You know what I mean? Like, where it's like, but with conquest, it's like a lot of the, if you just read through the flavor text of the conquest paladin, a lot of that stuff looks to be pretty kind of almost evil. It's very more self-centered or even cruel or merciless in a lot of ways, but you can potentially apply those in still an honorable capacity. Like for instance, another character we can probably reference is Thanos from Marvel, right? Thanos, his whole goal and desire was to wipe out half of the universe. In the movie, it was specifically to like help to, I guess, have resources or whatever the heck. In the comic books, it had more to do with the fact that he was literally obsessed and in love with the literal cosmic manifestation and concept of death. That being the case, though, he in the movie was always honorable. He didn't just kill willy-nilly. He also understood the weight and impact on taking any life that he did. He was not afraid
to
just
kill people.
No, he
waited until they attacked him.
He wasn't just a mass murderer who did everything and anything, like sold out his honor or his own whatever. Like even though honor and the concept of that and morality is very subjective, there also are very clear things that are like, hey, this is clearly dishonorable. Such as, again, that's why, like, for me, it's like if I was gonna boot somebody from the table and your honor would have to get to like down to like a 1. And that would take a lot. Like, you have to be doing a lot wrong to get your honor down to like a 1. And that would usually be like the only times that your honor would maybe just drop and increase is if you did something of significant true weight and effect. And you show that there was like a real shift in your character's paradigm almost. Again, if you're going to start screwing the party over, if you're going to start like stealing or killing people randomly, it's like, yeah, that same thing with a paladin. It's like, yeah, no, your honor is going to drop for that. That's you have no reason to do that. You have no, once more, we can even apply for like instance, like, okay, what is your character's motivations for doing this? Is this truly honorable? Is this like, are you keeping to a code of conduct? Like even like, for instance, assassins can have their own code of honor and conduct of saying like, hey, we don't just kill people willy-nilly. We kill very specific targets. We are doing this for this reason. That, in my opinion, okay, that's still honorable. You're not just a mass murderer. You're not just kind of crazy. You're not just kind of like whatever. If you don't have any real true reason and a reason that is like, again, relatively justifiable, then in my opinion, like that is not honorable then. For case in point, with Robin Hood, like your example, Robin Hood had a clear reason for why he did what he did. He usually never even killed anybody. He never killed people just willy-nilly. He stole from the rich, people who could afford it, didn't need all of that stuff.
Yeah,
to give people who did.
The reason I'm a little bit, I'm not gonna say perturbed or like turned off by this, but
skeptical or
hesitant is probably the best way I look at this. Is one, the weirdness of people being able to just tell your honor by looking at you. There has to be like a reason in game as to why everyone knows. I don't think it'd be
just telling you. It's like it's your reputation.
Well, no, that's
right.
Well, so if I'm an unknown criminal doing secret acts, who the fuck? Like, how do you know who I am, right? If I put an effort into you not finding out, unless I make a terrible mistake.
Well, see, that's let me say something about that real quick. Like, that's the thing, right? People who do more dishonorable stuff are usually not so great at being hidden, right? People who are hidden are usually much better at being honorable because they don't want all of that press or all that heat on them, right? It's like you hear about, again, like gangster bosses and all, like people who are like are known to be like deadly or insane,
they're famous,
untrustworthy. Like their notoriety and infamy exactly increases because
that's in
of
the
how
real
dishonorable
world.
They can be.
That's in the real world. I'm talking a fictional character. So for example, I make an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
My character is an assassin. He takes money for contracts.
Mm-hmm.
But say he has a business on the side where he kills people just not for fun like a serial killer would, but just at the behest of asking random people. Say you go to someone in the street and you're like, if you had a choice to get rid of somebody in your life, who would it be? And they're either angry enough at that person or belligerent enough to answer the question. My character now finds that person and kills them. But say I'm so good at this task. I'm so good at being an assassin
Mm-hmm.
that they don't even know who I am. I have like 2 identities. I put in all this effort for no one to ever figure out who I am. Technically, what I'm doing is a very dishonorable act. How in the hell?
Sure.
Well, no, killing people at the behest of someone being like, I don't like them, that's very dishonorable. The first one, you could make a case for being honorable because they're paying money. There is a reason. You have a code of conduct.
You have a reason right there. You ask that person.
There's no code of conduct there. That is purely for my own indulgence.
Sure.
I'm going to make that case clear. That is in my eyes, that is a...
Why did you ask that person at all then? If it's just for your own indulgence, why aren't you just killing willy-nilly? Why aren't you just randomly killing? If you are still...
It's, to me, like, I'm an assassin. I could kill anyone I wanted to.
Yeah.
In a small town.
But you need somebody to direct you and almost use you like a tool or a weapon themselves, almost.
To me, the reason I like it, say the character is... This is the fucked up part, right? I like it because then when that person finds out, someone they randomly
realize it was their fault.
Yes. That's the dishonorable part. I don't even have the blame on me.
Okay.
I enjoy the fact that someone else has to live with their regret. But how would they know I'm dishonorable unless they know about what I'm doing?
With a check.
But what I'm saying is I have a separate identity when I do this. Or like I have a seeming spell or something.
It's almost exactly the same concept as insight. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't necessarily know.
They don't know right away that I'm a murderer.
They can absolutely, and it even specifically says, it's like you can increase, it's like, again, with your reputation, a character with a high honor usually has a reputation that others know about, especially those who have high honor scores themselves. I think it would be the same in other ways. If you have a low honor score, a person with a high honor score would get an innate almost sense, depending on their role, to be like, all right. Yeah. You don't seem very, because again, it's a similar thing as insight, where that is the point of even having that score in the first place and having roles with that score, is to be like, especially if you have a higher honor scores, like you have a higher chance of recognizing people who don't. They can even help with your insight checks. Seem out of it. We talked about that before. It's like even how their behaviors, like even if they pretend to be honorable, even if it's like a king who everybody's like, oh, they're so benevolent, and then secretly they're like a horribly debaucherous person who like is a cannibal and eats people's secrets. Like if you have a high honor score, you have almost an innate sense about being like, they're lying or there's something not right. Like they do not.
I guess I do not
feel that thing.
I would have to see it played in practice as someone who
I think I could convince you.
The reason being is I like playing morally gray characters.
Oh, absolutely.
I will do things for my own gain. I will also do things for people who have earned my trust.
Yes.
I like playing characters that do not do something for someone unless there is a emotional attachment or like they have earned that from that person. I'm not out here to just do whatever you want just because it's the right thing.
Well,
I'm out here to do it because I trust you.
Honor isn't necessarily about doing the right thing.
I guess like that's
honor,
kind of like,
and that's what I'm telling you. Honor is all about it's like what a lot of people feel paladins are, right? Having a code, being so-called lawful is almost like honorable.
That's why I said I need to know what that code is, because having an ambiguous code makes this all a moot point.
Well, not entirely. Again, we all know what the baseline kind of foundation of what any code of conduct or whatever is set upon. You just said it yourself. Even implying it is having a purpose or reason for doing what you are doing and believing in that and following that as best as you can. Having honor is about staying true to, again, like what you believe is fair and reasonable. That's what honor is.
Let me throw this at you. Oath of the Conquest Paladin. Now, their second tenet, or their first 2 tenets, douse the flame of hope. It is not enough to merely defeat an enemy in battle. Your victory must be so overwhelming that your enemy's will to fight is shattered forever. A blade can end a life. Fear can end an empire.
Yep.
Their second code of conduct, rule with an iron fist. Once you have conquered, tolerate no dissent. Your word is law. Those who obey it shall be favored. Those who defy it shall be punished, as an example to all who might follow.
Yep.
Now, I could make, and they're also strength above all. I'm going to throw that in there too. You shall rule until a stronger one arises. Then you must grow mightier and meet the challenge, or fail to your own ruin. Now, I could make a case for a Oath of Conquest king, a paladin king, who is ostensibly a warlord, who, when he conquers civilizations, enslaves them.
Oh, yeah.
That is not an honor in me, to my opinion. Obviously, he follows his personal code of conduct. Enslaving someone is not honorable.
It's not dishonorable.
That's not honorable.
Honor and morality are not the same thing. They are not one
That's
thing,
my struggle.
Sammy. I know it is, but you have to.
I need a code.
Here's the thing. This is the code. Here's the thing, right? Here's how it would be honorable. It even specifically says he follows these tenets. This is his belief. This is understanding. He follows this. So, for instance, there are all kinds of barbarian tribes and everything where strength might makes right. It doesn't mean that it's good or benevolent, but it doesn't mean it's dishonorable because they follow the code to a T. So if a person comes along,
is being unhonorable. Chaotic is just unhonorable.
Yes, being chaotic, not
but
following.
I like being chaotic.
Yeah, but it's not honorable. Honorable again is like lawful. It is akin to lawful in that you are following this thing, this kind of thing that you believe in terms of like, once again, if another one comes and usurps him, whether or not he's honorable is like saying like, hey, he proved he was stronger than I am, and I accept that and I respect that. That is honor. Being dishonorable would be like, okay, I said all this stuff, I believe in all this stuff. But the moment that it was inconvenient for me, I stopped believing it because it wasn't convenient for me. That's dishonorable. Whether it's good or right is completely different. That's a completely different argument. Honor is following this tenet, this belief, and adhering to it, regardless of your situation or convenience. Because you know that, hey, this is, and again, honor can coincide with something that's right, but it doesn't always have to. It can be just as coinciding with something that a lot of people feel is wrong. It's merely your belief and your capacity and consistency with following this code that you have set out, even for yourself, even. That is honorable. Does not have to be good.
You know what, Adam? You want to run a campaign with honor in it? I would like to make a morally great character.
Absolutely. I think
who does do good things, but also might not always be the best.
I will even make the statement and say the most interesting, compelling characters are those who are not necessarily good or right, but they are still honorable. Again, Thanos, great example. He's not necessarily a good, righteous character. No, but he is one of the most honorable characters in any medium. Almost like all the best, like, you know, even like we could say even like Uncle Iroh before he had a change of heart in Avatar. Even when he was still like trying to burn Ba Sensei to the ground, was still honorable. And then eventually he became more righteous and more fair and more open and everything.
I'd say he was always honorable.
He was always honorable.
He never did it for the wrong reasons.
I mean, he did do it. He did do it for the wrong reasons. He was misguided.
Not intentionally.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Yeah. But that doesn't mean he wasn't honorable.
I think it's almost more honorable that you can end up seeing the
it
wrongs.
Is 100%.
So you know what? I mean, well,
not necessarily. Again, like again, honor and morality and righteousness are not the same thing.
No,
being honorable can coincide with that, but honor just means adhering to whatever code you have. Because like we could even talk about the Japanese definite, like samurai honor. Samurai honor is, if you do these specific, like it is very strict, very specific on what they believe to be honorable. And it is about, you know, abiding by these rules and these codes that you swore to uphold, even if it doesn't actually make sense, even if it is unfair or not okay to a lot of other people. It's like, well, this is what I swore to do. It is about upholding your promise and your oath. And that's why, again, you can absolutely just reference the Paladin to define truly what is considered to be honor. But that in essence, everybody, is our take on honor. Sammy, if you want to go ahead and take it away here for the second part of this one, which is sanity.
I will. So sanity is an interesting one for me. Obviously, I've mentioned my obsession with trying to do some sort of horror campaign. I played a little bit of Call of Cthulhu and I caught the bug. And as much as the system is clunky as hell,
Call of Cthulhu is
it's hard. And like we played with our D&D group, and half the group just did not understand how it was supposed to work. For me, I would like the idea of having a horror, dangerous thing, but with the advent of D&D magic and the fun abilities you get, because it's more fun. Call of Cthulhu is a you will lose a character every 2
Oh
sessions.
yeah,
Or if you're me,
it's very punishing. And
or if you're me, you lose your main character in the first hour and a half of playtime. The remaining hour and a half, you play a side character that has its own set of stats, which you then also lose that before the story ends for that session, which, believe me, was very fun. And I have made it very clear over and over again throughout many of our videos that I do not care when a character dies. I'm happy to live that story.
Hands on the character.
Well, except
you become numb
it
to
was
it
my level 2 sorcerer that never got to shine.
Not just him, your druid is actually one of the biggest ones.
Oh yeah, you know what? I have actual trauma associated with that.
I was gonna say, it's not that you don't care. You become numb to it because you have literally partitioned off the memories of your good characters that you actually liked and loved dying. So now you've gone the other way. You're like, I don't give a fuck about any of them anymore. No, they can all die. I'm not gonna get attached to any of them anymore because you've been so traumatized.
I've had other people tell me that I should make a character like that again, and I'm like, I can't.
See, yeah, no.
We're gonna touch on the concept of the sanity score. So similar to honor, it's a score that you get a baseline when you start your character. I would say as a DM, if I ran this, depending on your background and what you have done, your sanity might be higher and lower. And obviously I'd talk to them about that. It wouldn't be just me saying that and them having to accept it. But the idea is a character with a high sanity level is level-headed even in the face of bizarre circumstances, while a character with low sanity is unsteady, breaking easily when confronted by eldritch horrors that are beyond normal reason. Now, the caveat here is that your campaign has to kind of revolve around entities of like the
far realm.
The
Cthulhu mythos, like
the eldritch beings,
the eldritch horror.
Yeah, and so horror is a good idea. So they talk
about sanity. For D&D, it would be the far realm.
They talk about, and you can have
or
your
aberrations.
Yeah, just in general weird shit. I mean, look at like the astral plane as an example. You can counter anything there. But you talk about like sanity in the terms of like they're talking about replacing your intelligence check to roll lore about these weird eldritch horrors, decipher incomprehensible scrawlings. God, that is a long word. And like learn weird spells from these things. Now, I love this in the sense of I wouldn't replace their intelligence scores with the sanity score, in my opinion. Because they use it for like deciphering text written in a language so alien it threatens to break a character's mind. I'd have them make 2 checks. I'd have them make an intelligence check to even comprehend it. And if they do comprehend it, then they make a sanity check. But for me, there's stuff like overcoming lingering effects of madness, comprehending alien magic. But to me, the reason I want to use sanity is what it can do. So sanity can send you into bouts of madness. Sanity can keep you from being proficient in the things that you're proficient in. And so adding this layer of uneasiness and fear into something that is unspeakably incomprehensible and horrifying, to me, makes like the reason Call of Cthulhu works is because everybody's a normal person.
Yeah.
Some of them obviously like there are ones that have like they've been touched by eldritch horrors, so they have like one. But even then, they can do one magical thing. That is like
no, everybody's like they're usually a bit more talented, intelligent, or well read in Call of Cthulhu. But even then, they're not heroes. This is not to be confused.
They're normal people.
They're normal people encountering this above concept like understanding of anything. Like,
even then, in Call of Cthulhu, there is a character trope of literally like the thug.
Yep.
Look, because like if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, most of the time it's set in like either the 40s, the 60s, or the 80s.
Yeah.
Those are like in my opinion, like
the 3 archetypes.
Yeah. To me, not everybody feels the same way.
No, of course not.
You could do Call of Cthulhu in the 90s.
In the 20s.
Look at Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That's Call of Cthulhu in the 90s.
That's in the 70s. Well, 70s.
Or 70s?
Yeah, it starts because they're playing the original D&D. It
shit.
starts in the 70s. It's not anywhere near the 90s, bud. It starts in the 70s and then goes
Call
into
of
the
Cthulhu
80s.
in the 90s, in my opinion.
You
90s would be
can.
fun.
You could do it
90s would
in
be fun.
2023 if you
Well,
want. You could do it in
But it
present
wouldn't, that wouldn't
time.
be as, but that's not cool. 90s is cool because that's when they're
No.
inventing. That's when they start to invent like home technologies, so you can do weird shit with that. But the reality is, I'll back up. The thing is like you can make a character that has literally zero connection to anything related to the Eldritch horror. They are somehow there. You have to tie them into why they're there in the first place. But think of like, as you were talking about the 20s, think of like a 20s bootlegger. So normal guy, they're good at hiding. They are proficient in blunt weapons or guns because they have fought people before. They're a thug, ostensibly. They're a henchman.
Yep.
But now for some reason, they now have encountered something terrible. They don't have magic. They don't understand why any of this is there. Maybe someone else that is there does.
They have no concept of.
They have no concept, and that to me, or like a police officer, or there's a detective or an investigator that goes along because these crazy people are like, no, something's going on, and you have to be there.
Yep.
And you look at any horror movie, any like horror movie related to like the place that you can't know. That darkness that you never see through, and what crawls out.
Literal abstract, like
it's abstract horror.
Yeah, the space. There is no true form, place. It's mind break, is what it is.
It's the fear that's
all about
somewhere
your ego and mind break that you just cannot comprehend.
It's the fear of the unknown. That something you cannot comprehend is watching you and is going to do something to you.
Your imagination will always be far more terrifying than almost anything you can actually see. And so that is the element that eldritch horror, or like, you know, what is who is our kind of our main, who wrote Call of Cthulhu? Like, it's the author,
he's terrible.
Yeah, but what is their name again? Like that.
H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraftian horror.
Lovecraftian horror is the term that is usually used to describe this type of.
Unfortunately,
Lovecraftian horror.
Unfortunately, this wonderful genre was written by such a terrible human being. But
there's a lot of things, a lot of beloved stuff that's written by a lot of people that aren't great. Rather problematic.
The reason that I like Sanity and the reason I want to try to implement it at some point is because there is no strict. It's kind of the antithesis to the honor system. There is no strict code of sanity. Sanity is subjective. And no, well, let me try to explain. And the reason being is that depending on your experience with the unknown, and depending on your background, what you're used to, all of these things, they all come into play. Yeah, in my opinion, if you're running this right. So, say the average character has a baseline 11 sanity. I would then, that's kind of how it works here. If they're doing point buy, or if they have standard array, it's like 13 or 11 ostensibly. For me, if you have a research background or you've encountered something like this before in your backstory, you might have a slightly higher sanity. But if you're frail of mind and aren't used to combat, your sanity might be lower. There's all sorts of factors. And so And so for me, someone who relishes in the abject fear of what's going to happen to a character, this is a wonderfully fun thing to add in and make your own. Now, you can definitely do this wrong. You play this,
very much so.
The thing with Sanity, you play this like a numbers game and you're already losing. Obviously, there is a number aspect. Obviously, there are tally marks. And you have to use that system for it to make sense so your players understand what's going on.
Same thing with honor.
But if you stick strictly to that one system and you don't make it your own in a certain way, I think it loses some of its shine. It's
going to be a pretty short game. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty short game.
And the reality is that when you look at, say, I'm going to use the example of a combat veteran. Someone who has experiences the harshness of war and lived through abject turmoil that they cannot rid themselves of. Now, there is a downside to that, but there is an upside in the sense that if they continue in that space, they are less subjective to what those influences are. And it runs the same with Sanity and this horror kind of aspect. The first time you encounter something is a jarring, terrifying, mind
Well,
ripping experience.
it's almost like it's like akin of basically blasting open a door.
Yeah,
Like
it's opening what is it? Pandora's box.
Yeah,
The
where it's
first
like
time you open it, you're gonna be irrevocably scarred
and
for the rest of your life.
for sure. Like you're going to be morphed and changed in some way, and now the door is open. And
I'm gonna use a wonderful character. We talked about Thanos. I'll go
Yes.
DC Comics for this. When you look
Oh,
at Constantine.
Constantine.
So
Well
depending on the
Perfect.
iteration of what you're watching, reading, or listening to, Constantine
Yeah.
is a widely different character across many
Oh,
mediums.
all the time.
Now, what I recommend is there is a series of DC animated movies. If you're not a reader, there is a series of
They're
DC
good.
animated movies currently on HBO, all about Constantine.
Oh, yeah.
He's also in a couple of Justice League movies as well.
I
But
was gonna say a lot of Justice League movies too,
but
like Justice League
they're
Dark.
all, most of them are. But the reality of Constantine is that he had an unfortunate encounter with the demon realm. Things went terrible in his life, and he became ostensibly a drug addict, an alcoholic, a very reprehensible human being.
He's done everything. He is by no means a hero.
He's an anti-hero at best. But through his interactions with these beings, he became desensitized, able to roll with the punches. Obviously, there's still things that terrify him and catch him off guard.
He's not an idiot, exactly, because he's experienced. He knows what real threats are truly.
But the reality is that the mundane horrors don't affect him the same as a regular person.
No.
And so you have to look at sanity as something you build up. I don't think that any particular D&D character, I think like sanity would be great in Curse of Strahd.
Oh yeah,
a Curse of Strahd campaign.
That's a perfect.
If you want to take a campaign that's already notoriously difficult and make it a horrifying experience, sanity, and you would have to do your work as a DM to play up the horror elements. But I'm gonna tell you this. I'm gonna tell you this right now. There was a moment in Curse of Strahd where we were betrayed by someone who we thought was a normal person and wasn't. And I will not tell you where, and I will not tell you when.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because that broke
such a great moment.
That broke me as a character and a player for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
At that point, you're never going to trust anybody else.
No, and I didn't. I have not trusted people since, and that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So there is a case that this is going to affect people in the real world as well as in the game. And so this, to me, having this horror aspect, if you really play into it and you play into sanity, you need to talk to your players about that first. Because I'm someone I love like body horror, psychological horror, torture. All of those things are on the table for me as a DM.
Fair.
But if you talk to your players and they're like, well, we're not okay with this thing or this thing, and you're willing to compromise and not include those, fine. What I'm telling you is that you please do not spring horrible, disgusting shit onto players that are not ready for it or not accepting of it.
Again,
because it's not. And you know what? Yeah, we said session 0 before. I'm going to say it again, especially
0. There's
this, and there's one other thing that I think I'm going to tie in right after here, even though it's kind of out of order. Sure. Do not do this to someone without their consent.
No.
And the reason I say
that is the number one thing for these types of campaigns: consent and being just clear and upfront about the content, what you're planning on doing. Again, honestly, you should do that probably for any campaign, obviously, but especially for campaigns that are deliberately, specifically designed to provoke very specific emotional reactions from your characters. It is paramount, absolutely vital, that you are blatantly clear about what your content is going to contain for your campaign.
Yeah, and I want to tie this in to one of the combat options, which is the injury table. And the reason I want to do that is because the injury table is widely, like, there's a lot of people that like the idea of it, have never played with it. That's this guy right here. There's a lot of people that like the idea of it, have played with it, had middling to good success with it. And then there's people that vehemently despise the injury table. And now it makes sense. We're playing a game like D&D. This is a fantasy, adventuring, thing. The last thing I want to do is inhibit my players. But if you're going for something more realistic, if you're going for something a little bit grittier, a little bit more horrific, and this applies to player characters, this could apply to NPCs, which is, I think, something that would make this a lot more immersive, is the injury table. So let's go over just kind of what it says. Damage normally leaves no lingering effects. This option introduces the potential for long-term injuries. It's up to you to decide when to check for a lingering injury. A creature might sustain a lingering injury under the following circumstances: when it takes a critical hit, when it drops to 0 hit points but isn't killed outright, when it fails a death saving throw by 5 or more. Now, these are some options. They want you to roll on a table to determine injury. Now, if you're like me, when bad things happen to players or enemies, you usually describe it, or you ask the players, how do you want to attack? How do you want to do this? But examples of some injuries: losing an eye, which will give you disadvantage on wisdom, on perception checks, and ranged attack rolls, and magic attack rolls that are ranged, not just physical. Now, you can regenerate. If you get hit with this injury twice, you are considered blind. Armor a hand, you can't hold anything with 2 hands. You can only hold a single object at a time. That makes sense. Lose a leg or a foot. If your speed on foot is halved, you must use a cane or crutch to move, which then means you only have 1 hand available for everything else. And you fall prone after using the dash action, which is an interesting caveat. Like, yeah, you can dash, but you're gonna trip. You can get a limp. Your speed on foot is reduced by 5 feet. You must make a DC 10 dexterity saving throw after using the dash action. If you fail to save, you fall prone. Now, for me, that's like if you have a leg injury and then you heal it, but because you're not used to walking on that leg again, you'll have a limp for a certain amount of time. There's internal injuries, where if you make an action in combat and you have, say, a busted liver or some shit like that, you have to make con saves to continue acting. If you receive magic healing, or if you spend 10 days doing nothing, you can restore the injury. You can have broken like broken ribs, except the DC is less than having an internal injury. You can have horrible scars, which give you disadvantages on persuasion checks and advantages on intimidation checks. A festering wound, which reduces your hit point maximum by 1 every 24 hours while the wound is there, and you die if your hit point maximum drops to 0. The wound heals if you receive magical healing. Alternatively, someone can tend to the wound and make a DC 15 medicine check once every 24 hours. After 10 successes, the wound heals. And minor scar doesn't have any adverse effects. Now, this is a D20 injury table. You can look online for plenty of D100 injury tables with a vast menagerie of injuries.
It's kind of insane. It's just,
it's just a little ridiculous. To be fair, a lot of people are not going to like this.
I will absolutely come out right and say I'm not a huge fan of the injury table concepts. Like I like some of these. Like some of these I feel like could be nice to be applied. My only issue and caveat is that there are so few ways in the game, even at higher levels, to remedy any of this. And I know for a fact no one, unless you're a very specific type of like player / group, no one's gonna like to play the game while having basically permanent negatives to something that they didn't have necessarily personal control over to begin with. Like that,
for someone like me, I'm okay with it. The reality
because you become desensitized and don't give a shit about your
the reality is all of these can be either cured by regenerate, heal, or prosthesis. And to be fair, those things have to be available. I think if you're going to run something like an injury table, having the availability of things like prosthesis, both magical and mundane, having casters in your party or available to the party that can cast things like heal or regenerate, especially when you get a little bit higher levels. Like once you get level 10, I feel like being able to pay for someone to heal your wound if you have a grievous injury, I think is something that should be available if you're going to run this table. And the reason I say that is because when they get the injury, it is already hard enough to then get back to those people. if they don't have that availability in their own party. And so I think if you want to add a little bit of difficulty, a little bit of spice, a little bit of harrowing circumstances,
Or even
I think
gritty realism, you know,
as we've talked about with the sanity and stuff like that, this is something that I think definitely can be used in a way that isn't, you're not trying to do this to your characters. I'm going to say this right now. If you as the DM want to implement this, you have to have for yourself a legitimate set of rules for why you would inflict an injury on someone. I think critical hits are fine. For example, like in Critical Role Campaign 1, Vax, I think, pulled someone out of lava.
Yeah, he stepped
into lava. Now, if we all want to be very just blunt here, you put your hand into lava, that hand is no longer usable. If anything, Matt should have been harsher on what happened to Vax. The only reason it didn't is because he was wearing magical items.
I was going to say, he's wearing magical boots. So
the reality is, though, something like lava, something like very potent acid will do quick, irreparable damage.
Yeah, irrevocable damage.
And the fact of the matter is that we're in a magical campaign. So there are ways to combat that. There are ways to gain resistances. I would say if you have resistance to fire and you step in lava, you will not roll on the critical injury table. You know what I mean? But if you do not, and you do, you definitely are. If you spend a large amount of time in if you spend 10, 14 seconds in lava with resistance, you will then roll. But if you don't have resistance and you even touch it, you're already on the table for
me. Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. Like I absolutely agree.
I'm using something that's really terrible as an example.
Well, because that's what it should be for, in my opinion, for injuries. But I just like the concept that you're essentially wanting to say is that there are legitimate risks to being an adventurer, to going into combat, which I absolutely agree with. I feel like there should be a little bit more of that too, or which is, instead of just being like, oh, you fight a dragon, you literally get chomped in its giant mouth and teeth, and you're literally being literally bitten with its sharp. It's there should be some kind of lingering effect or something. Maybe again, like I said, I agree with you. I think I'm more open to this if a GM is willing to offer more resources and ways of being able to remedy the situation. My only problem with this specifically is the fact, again, casting a spell like Regenerates or even Heal, those are both Heal is a 6th level spell, I believe, at lowest. Regenerate, I'm pretty sure, is a 7th, maybe even 8th level spell at that. And those are the Heal technically doesn't actually regenerate a lost limb.
No, and it only works for some of these things, like the infection.
Yeah, and so that being the case, it's having just that one spell, that one source, and that being an incredibly high level source at that is if you don't have access to a cleric. I also personally believe it's if you're going to have a more punishing type of game where characters are more liable to die, I also think you should have, again, resources to revive them. I have no problem with character death so long as it's just because again, you're in a magical world, and if you're not going to be leveling your characters up fast, it's hey, if they want to keep playing that character, I feel personally they should have the right to be able to choose to play that character some more. They might have to sit out for a bit, or even better, they can have a substitute character for a time until the other character. They've done that multiple times. You referenced Critical Role. They've done that multiple times in Critical Role, where they've Matt has given them a person or a way to revive them if, one, the player wants to come back as that character, and two, the characters, want to go revive their friend, which usually they do.
It's a story beat. I've talked to you about my barbarian that got killed, and they reincarnated
him.
So I had to play another character for a long period of time. And the only reason I was able to get my DM to agree to the reincarnation was because, one, it worked for the story. Two, we had a sideline character that unfortunately the person you've met him, Tony.
Yeah.
So he no longer played with us at that time because of work and life and whatever. But his character still existed in the universe, and he was a high enough level druid at that point that he could reincarnate my character. So we got in contact with him. He was able to do it, and my character came back. And it was a very story beat driven thing. It was, I got to class as a paladin. There was this whole I got to meet my god and all this stuff. And so he gave me something that I don't think a lot of tables get the access of, which is, even if it's down the line, you can bring back an old character.
Yeah.
And the reason I like stuff like this, and in my opinion, Um, a party should have access to some form of way to get a dead character to somewhere, right? And the reality is that the injury table and like the massive damage table, like for the system shock stuff, it is ostensibly a deterrent for low level risky play, because either you can be very successful or suffer something that is uncurable at this point in your play style, in your level, in your time you have spent playing in the campaign. And the reason being is, like, as you get higher level, you should be able to circumvent those things, which is why I like this, because it makes lower levels real. These are real people who can die like that.
Oh, I agree.
And so, like, I understand some people don't like this because D&D for them is an escape into a heroic fantasy. But for me, I create characters with a background and a story that might not go the way they want it to. In fact, most of the time, it doesn't go anywhere close to the way they want it to, because that's just how storytelling works. And so stuff
That's
like
true.
you look at like the massive damage table. If you take damage from a single source equal to or greater than half your hit point maximum, you must succeed on a DC 15 con save or suffer a random effect determined by a roll on the system shock table. Now, here are some effects on the system shock table. The creature drops to 0 hit points.
Yeah.
So you are making death saves. The creature drops to 0 hit points but is stable. The creature is stunned until the end of its next turn. The creature can't take reactions and has a disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks until the start of its next turn.
The end of its next turn.
Sorry, end of its next turn. The creature can't take reactions until the end of its next turn. Now, we've talked about monsters, we've talked about abilities, and that does mess with action economy. The reality, though, is, and this happens, I feel like this should have happened to me many times. In my Monday campaign, I play a weak, intelligence-based warlock. The amount of times I've gotten hit in one turn for over half of my hit points, and there is, because to me, hit points are not vitality in the sense of like you can take a bunch of hits, you have HP hit points. No, they're not hit points. They are the physical and mental capability of continuing on despite the damage you have taken. And if you look at it that way, the injury table, the massive damage table, stuff like that kind of starts to make sense. I'm not saying you have to go as harsh as this.
I was gonna say, my point being is again, I feel like it's just, especially at low level, the amount of negative effects that can occur due to, again, a lot of things outside your direct control or choice is a bit too intense and punishing, in my opinion. So here's the thing. I like the massive damage. I like the system shock idea and concept. Where it's like, once more, it gives credence to, like, if you take or even deal massive amounts of damage, there should be some kind of effect for the more damage you've dealt. It's also, I feel like it can also kind of play into another homebrew rule that I really like, which is heroic crits, which is essentially the concept of, like, if you crit, you just automatically get the max amount of damage for your damage pool, and then you roll again. Therefore, that right there guarantees that you will be doing a lot more damage, like higher damage than you might otherwise do just by even hitting. Right. Yeah. One thing that sucks about, like, the normal vanilla rules for crits for 20 rolls is you could potentially still even do less damage than you would have even if you didn't crit. That sucks. But with that, it's like you do this, and then also on top of that, if you have the massive damage like rule in place, it's like that also then gives you potentially some more effects that could be applied that could actually be like, hey, you just did some massive shit, which is also, like Sam said before, if you are facing a creature that can potentially just do this type of damage to you, like, on average, that also will severely lower your desire to want to engage that creature in combat. And I think that's kind of more versatility to the game, which I absolutely love and I agree with.
Because I think there's something I learned from playing through Curse of Strahd and playing through Tomb of Annihilation. And if you all who are listening or watching don't quite understand the connotation of those two campaigns, and Adam knows very well, they are known to, at least Tomb of Annihilation is known to be a meat grinder of sorts, as is Curse of Strahd. The character you come in with, you should not expect to finish the campaign with that character. Now, for some DMs, that means if your whole team dies, then you do start the campaign over. For other DMs, it means that there is a backup character that is in the works that they explain why they come in, or you have to find them, etc., etc. And which is what we did. Now, when I played Curse of Strahd, I went through two characters who died, and I ended with a third character. I died more than anyone else in the game. Everyone else either died none or died once. I died twice. The reality is, in a game like Curse of Strahd or Tomb of Annihilation, is that there is, like, in a normal game of D&D, I would say that a DM will design the encounters you're supposed to go to based on your current level. In a game like Curse of Strahd or Tomb of Annihilation, where there is no current level, there are set encounters, similar to open world RPGs where you can wander into the wrong area. You can make the wrong decision.
Yep.
You can end up in a place that will kick the ever-loving shit out of you and spit you out a crumpled, bloody mess.
Yep.
And to me, I think if you implement the injury and damage table, I would like to run something with like four players. We'll start level 2. And I want to see how often this comes into play. I want to use a wider injury table.
To be fair, I feel like it would also be a very, again, incredibly dependent on the GM. Like this one thing.
That's what I mean. I want to sense the balance out, because obviously we're saying, like, if these things are available, this is great. But have either of us played in a game where injury table and massive damage are present?
I played in a game where System Shock was present, and where the GM was literally a type of person that was like, "Hey, you don't get a save on this thing. This building explodes, and you're just gonna take this damage. You don't get a save for this. You're just gonna take this damage." And it was like, okay, you have to make a con save. And luckily, again, I had a character, even though they weren't like proficient with con saves, they were good. I had pumped enough con into them where it was very hard for me to potentially fail. But it's still that my point being is that thing on, like, a lot of the time when a GM implements this kind of stuff, it gets a bad rap because that GM is deliberately trying to manipulate events for these to come into effect. They have a very unhealthy obsession with being like, I want all my player characters to have injuries so that they can whatever. And it's just like, no, see, that's not, you can't, like.
No, and I think you would trust me in the sense of the reason I want this is not to do it because I feel like it. I like the idea of a party having to work together to overcome new shortcomings. And that's something that, like,
or even have actual risk for your actions and choices against the creep. Like again,
yeah, you succeeded, you won this fight, you come back to town a hero. But now your wizard moves at 15 feet around.
You're showing battle scars and wounds from your time.
And your fighter can't wield his two-handed sword anymore. Like, there are the reality is, especially in low-level play of D&D, obviously there's the risk of dying outright. But to me, once you get past like level 7, obviously there's situations where, like, you'll TPK and someone dies, but there's no lasting damage for a bad fight barely won. And I'll use the example, I've talked to you about this in my Monday campaign. The last fight we had with a dragon, people went down, like 2 people went down like 3 times. Well, a bunch of people like almost died. And there was no repercussion for that.
Here's what I like to do in that. Like, for my games, I usually, and again, another homebrew rule, but I think it's also one that a lot of people like to implement too, is the first time you go down, there aren't necessarily any adverse effects per se, but if you keep going down and coming, because obviously, like, one of the biggest, ganks, or the one of the biggest, like, what's the word I'm looking for when people take advantage of like a particular mechanic or whatever, I forget the term for it, but essentially one of the biggest, like, things that people take advantage of is like healing word, right? You just bring that person up with like 1 hit point or whatever, because it's just like, it's action economy. As long as you have that person up, they get to do their turn, even if they go down,
or if they just don't die outright.
Yeah. Point being is, like, for me, the second time, like, if you keep going down, going up, down, you're gonna start accruing exhaustion. at that point.
See,
So
I like that.
you have not only is it's like, okay, the first time you go down, that's fine. You get brought back up. You don't have any adverse effects. You go down again, you come back up, you get 1 point of exhaustion. You go down again, you come back up, you get another point of exhaustion. And as that exhaustion comes, you also start to get worse and worse adverse effects for your choice and decision to stay in the fight with low hit points like that. Not just about the fact that maybe they could kill you quicker, and they might even just be like, oh, you keep coming back, I'm just going to focus on you until you're freaking dead at this point. But if they're not, then you're gonna still eventually if you go down more than 5 times in one encounter, or hell, if you don't get the ability to get rid of that exhaustion before your next encounter, you will die. You will not be able to keep coming back up.
No, because exhaustion has its limits.
Exactly. You can only do it, I think, 5, maybe 6 times until you literally are dead. I think a 6th level of exhaustion is death. And again, at even lower, again, you get some pretty decent debuffs depending on your level of exhaustion even before that, which can exceedingly hamper your whole time and stuff with this. But like my point being is like, another reason why I'm not a huge fan of this is that I feel like almost, again, as a GM, as we just said, I feel like that vastly limits me in the amount of encounters or even certain monsters and stuff that I would like to throw at my party, exactly because of the risk that they could incur due to the table itself. Where it's like, I like to have parties where I can throw some badass, even like homebrew types of monsters at them that can do all this cool shit, all these things and all that stuff. And I don't want to have, because of the injury or the specific mechanics that we agreed upon, punish my characters for the fact that, or my players for the fact that I want to be able to throw high level, cool, powerful shit at them.
So I would say there is a case to be made obviously it gives you options for why these injuries are happening, right? Critical hits.
Absolutely. It's not like it doesn't make sense.
I think critical hits are a good way to start, right?
I don't know if it'd be crits for me. I feel like it needs to be dependent on the damage.
I think for me,
because if you just constantly crit and then you just rack up injuries,
that's what I mean.
Crits,
I feel
that's not.
Like it depends on the encounter, and as a DM, there have been times, and I don't know how you feel about stuff like this, but there have been times where I have maybe crit and then say, well, I rolled a 19. And the reason being is this wasn't supposed to kill you, or it's definitely going to fucking outright kill you and it wasn't meant to, stuff like that. But the reality is that the injury table is only rolled on when you as a DM choose it to be rolled on, so you can make rules for yourself. The reality is, though, a fair amount of these injuries, I would say, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 8 injuries are healed by basic healing, basic magical healing. So a healing word or a cure wounds, or even a good enough medicine check I would allow. The rest of them, not so much.
Like I said, I like, for instance, I like the limp. I think limp and down is good. Again, losing full limbs due to potentially a poor roll after taking either a critical hit or just getting downed once even.
To me, I think for me, the critical hit injuries would be delegated to the less severe, and the going down injuries would be delegated to the more severe. Because to me, going down, I feel like a lot, and I'm guilty of this myself, going down to a lot of players isn't a big deal if the person 2 turns behind them is the cleric. But if you want to use actual, and this is something we've talked about before, strategy, using strategy in D&D. I understand not a lot of people want to play this like a chess game, but
that's the fun of combat. I think
even decent strategy should be widely pushed, because I play.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I agree.
I hate this. I play with people who do not seem to understand the grips of strategy.
I know. I play with those kinds of people too.
And you know what? If you want to play that way, that's fine. But to me, if I were to run this in a group, I would tell them outright. I'm like, hey, you go down, it's bad.
Well, that's not so bad. I'm saying is that's why I like to utilize the homebrew rule of exhaustion, where it's this is a clear thing that's you can't just keep mindlessly going in here and being fine. I agree. I feel like people should be more wary of going down. Another thing that I will say, I will actually say on the other hand of it, to the benefit of the injuries table, specifically with like in regards to critical hits, is if you have like a freaking bear totem barbarian at a high level, it is almost so impossible to get them down to 0 hit points, let alone death saves, kill them or whatever. But the critical hits obviously could offer a little bit more of a risk and stuff to them, despite the fact that they have like double hit points of everything else in their party and have the most obviously in that regard. In that particular vein though, like I feel like again it's less about critical hits and even about the amount of damage that you are taking. So, and even in regards to, I'll say the bear totem who would have damage, I would still be like, nah, you have damage and you can take it. But if it reaches a certain threshold, like, because there's no way they're going to be able to deal like a certain, but if I would say again, a hit that can deal amount of damage to you that's like like a straight up 50 points or more is still like a thing to like knock the wind out of you. Like,
so I have a question for you. Would you be willing to try? I'm thinking this up on the spot a little bit. So obviously I'm going to use a more expanded injury table. I feel like there's more injuries that could be added that would make it not necessarily all debilitating.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, I'm not
like I would say more than half of these injuries are debilitating to most playstyles.
I mean, I feel like, and I feel like there's a theme with me. Simple is better in a lot of ways in this game because it's already complicated enough. And so like, but I don't disagree that having maybe a little bit more versatility and diversity could make it a little bit better if they're not as, intense or severe. Like,
fair enough. So I'll put it this way, Adam. So obviously I'm going to get rid of the crit rule. That's I'm doing it for me. The crit rule is not going to do anything completely debilitating.
Okay.
Things like the limp, internal injury,
maybe you get crit like multiple times. I could see that where it starts to wear you down,
like the festering wound, stuff that isn't going to take a limb off of you, right? Things that will still allow you to mostly do what you do normally. Obviously, the internal injury is a rough one because you can lose an action for a turn. But I feel like if you get hit hard enough, and a crit will do that sometimes, you kind of deserve to get winded.
No, I agree. I 100% agree. Like I said, everything from limp down, I think is actually pretty good because
what I don't want for crits is losing an eye, arm, leg, hand, or foot.
Yeah, no,
I don't want that. But
that's unless like you have, for instance, items that specifically do that.
That's different. Like I'm talking baseline across the board, right?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I have another thing to say, but please do finish your thing. I don't want to interrupt you. I apologize.
So I'm trying to make a case for you to play in a game that I would do this in.
Okay.
So far, critical hits, I would take off the limb losing stuff because I feel like crits happen too often. I would also say that it could only be one crit in a round. If you get crit twice, you don't get 2 injuries. It's just the one. That doesn't seem fair to me because that's just like
that's what I'm saying. It's like if you just crit and you're racking up. And it also increases the chances of you rolling any of this shit. So crits,
it's the best part about this is that the whole injury thing it's per creature, which also applies to enemies. But the 0 hit points to me, I like your idea with exhaustion if you're doing this like injury light. But for me, when you hit 0 is when you're gonna get the debilitating injuries, things like losing limbs, and that isn't every time. It's not every time.
Okay.
I would need to make a table where when you go down, like the first time, it's very rare. The second time you go down, it's less rare. You know what I mean?
Say it would also have to be a very specific type of going down. Like if you're gonna lose a limb from going down, it's got to be from something that's either gonna slash you or break your bone.
So that's what I mean. Like so for this is like lose an arm, hand, eye, leg, or foot. Right? There's a difference between losing a limb and breaking a limb, right? So, for example, I would need to make a different injury table. I think this is a good start. But there needs to be like a middle injury between the losing a limb and internal damage / scars. There needs to be like fractures, sprains, things of that nature, where like if you're fighting, say like a bullet, which comes out of the ground and like crushes you,
Yep.
right? You might not lose your leg, but you broke the bone, like you broke the bone in your thigh.
Which I would also say, like, for any breaks or fractures, can be healed easily. I don't necessarily think it needs to be right away, but it's not regeneration to fix that.
No, it doesn't. But for example, the limp requires one healing. You heal once and you're good. I would say a fracture or a break requires maybe 2 days, maybe.
I agree. Or that time can potentially be increased if you spend, like, I would even say like a spell slot or whatever to heal.
To me, it would be like you can heal it and you can also splint it.
Yeah.
So you would gain some movement back from the splint, and you would also gain some healing from the healing, but it would not heal that day. It would take you a multitude of days.
I would agree. I feel like it should be a little bit longer of a time, but that at the very least, you have some control over its expediency, depending on the resources that you apply to it.
And it doesn't make you completely out of the... Like, obviously, in the moment you get injured, you're going to have a hard time. Your movement is severely limited.
If maybe not cut in half.
I wouldn't say zero. I would say
no, not zero.
I would
you
say
can still move even with like a fucking busted shit. Like you're an adventurer.
So, for example, you lose a foot or a leg, your speed is halved. Let's say, for this case, your speed is reduced by 15 feet.
Okay, sure.
We'll put that number on it. If you break your thing, your speed is reduced by 10 feet. Because a limp is 5 feet. So break is 10 feet.
Okay.
Now, that also is like, you have disadvantage on things like athletics checks, dex saves. So obviously there is a veritable risk to this injury. But it also decreases your overall traveling time because you will not have the endurance. So to me, splinting the leg, having someone be able to give you an opportunity, like putting someone with a broken arm or leg on a horse is way better than putting someone who can walk. So I think if this is done in a fair way,
I absolutely agree. Like I said, I like the concept of getting more risk.
Yeah, get rid of the death saving throw by 5 or more injury. I don't think that's necessary.
No, that seems stupid because
for me, I would say you drop the first time, it's like maybe a 20% chance, 1 in 5 to get an injury. The second time is 2 in 5. Third time is 3 in 5. Fourth and fifth time, I think it's like 90%.
Well, at that point, it would be the same as exhaustion. Where as you go down, you are more susceptible to stuff. So for me, like that.
I think the critical hits do the more mundane of things like sprains, the injuries that, like, if someone walks over to you and does a cure wounds or a healing word, the injury's gone.
Yeah.
But anything like the criticals just do the in the moment extra damage.
Yeah.
The deaths, like the going down, is where shit gets really bad. Or if you make like a super risky play.
Yep.
You know, like super risky shit. Like falling a great distance, shit like that.
Yeah, but I agree.
I think for me, I have to do obviously a lot of work to make this viable.
But I'm open to it. Like I said, I would love to play in a game that does have a little bit more risk, like you said, because I am also like you. I love to play strategically and tactically and tactically, because that is part, in essence, what I like about the game. What I feel like it separates it from a lot of other stuff is that you have a lot of freedom, but depending, and obviously it is very reliant upon the GM to give you a number of things to utilize for your tactics and your strategy in the environment, your friends, whatever else, the items and equipment that you have been provided and that you can acquire. So it's like, for the injuries, I'm absolutely down for there to be like it would have to be heavily homebrewed, because obviously this just a baseline one, too severe and far too potentially frequent for it to be viable, in my opinion.
It's too back and forth, because you can either have a limp or your leg's gone.
Yeah, and it's like, again, regenerate being basically the only real thing that can fix that is an issue.
It's a seventh
level spell. Like, you're not gonna even trying. And again, I also understand other people's argument of being like, well, how would you guys be able to afford or get the type of person that can perform a 7th level spell? They would have to be at least a 12th to 14th level character at that point. Like,
so the funny thing is, let's look at regenerate. Oh, that's right. It doesn't even cost gold to cast.
Yeah.
So the person who is charging you to cast this isn't even it doesn't cost very much. Obviously you have to find the right person, and maybe they charge more for their services because they're a higher level spellcaster. But the reality is that if you're going to include something like this, and believe me, I will homebrew a table and a concept, and I will show it to you before it's ever implemented.
I would love
but
to see that. I'd be very interested.
I personally, I think that the injury concept can add a lot to a campaign, because I feel like
I agree.
there's a lot of fights and things that happen where people get low, and this isn't every like RPG or team based.
It's not a video game.
It's not supposed to be. Obviously, there are times like baseline 5e.
There are video game elements.
Is very video gamey if you play without a lot of seriousness, and if you want like. You look at like older editions, 3.5 is like the ultimate single player RPG.
It's number crunch. Like
it is number crunchy, which is why I've tried to look at 3.5 and I can't do it. I will eventually.
I haven't dived too deep into 3.5 as of yet, but you know.
But 5e is ostensibly supposed to be way more approachable, and what it suffers from because of that is there is a very easy way to game
the system.
What is supposed to be very violent, vulnerable, and deadly situation.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of real annoying like cheesiness and exploits. That was the term I was looking for before.
Yeah. And exploits. It's not even like they're not even exploits. It's just the fact that if someone goes down, you can hit them with a healing word, and they're at least good for that round because no one's going to kill them outright once you get a certain level.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, most of the time,
obviously, and it was also it's about the mentality of the GM and even the players, right? On like again, the issue being is like the GM could probably, especially at higher levels, just outright if you drop to 0, you could just be like, all right, I'm gonna kill that character now.
Oh but no, and that's not even what I'm talking about. I meant like, for example, my Monday campaign, we fought the 2 dragons. We shouldn't have fought 2 dragons.
Probably not. It's not a good idea.
There were multiple times where the DM had someone just to the ground, had 2 attacks, hit 1, so that's an auto crit, 2 death saves.
Yep.
And with advantage, like rolled it in front of us, missed the second attack.
Yeah.
That character should be dead.
Not necessarily.
But no, like hear me out. With advantage, attacking a creature, you have a high chance to hit. The odds are that character should be dead. Yes. You should have hit twice. You hit once.
The odds are they should technically have died.
And we had that happen twice. Well, it had to happen once. The second time it happened, I healed a character just enough to survive the first attack.
Yeah.
But the second attack only brought him to 2 death saves.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, I would say, like, we as a party, the way we play, we're not super abusive of that. But it got to the point where, like, we were trying to keep people alive, and it got to the point where it was like, this is starting to get really bad.
Gaming.
And I told and I said this out of character. I was like, I hope you guys understand that, like, my character, when you guys start dying, she's not staying here.
Yeah.
Like, she has no reason to stay here and die. So, well, like,
technically speaking, nobody does. Like, no, like it makes no sense to be like.
There are a lot of TPKs that happen because people don't run.
Yeah.
And so, like, adding stuff like this that actually accentuates the fact that, like, yeah, you're fucked.
Well, here's the thing, buddy. Like, do not be under any illusion that the people who would still stay and fight in those TPKs, this particular thing is by no means going to change their mentality on being like they're gonna run now because they're
it's not supposed to. What I mean is, and like if that's your character, that's your character. I love that. I love
the character. I feel like
well, some people aren't like that, but some people actually some people make a character that's like that. Like
it's
me.
True. They will die. They will die before retreating. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Or they will die for the people that they care about. The reality is, I think the injuries and stuff like that can add enough to make something a little bit more realistic to the fact of, like, you just had a really hard fight. And the reality is, in D&D 5e, is that you can have a really hard fight and take a long rest and you're good as new. And that's just, like, I've tried to play this up as characters before, where like we have a really bad fight and that affects my character down the road, and it doesn't really get implemented by other characters or the
No,
DM.
no,
It's just not seen, right?
because it's much harder to do so, because obviously you have to
It's
you have to deliberately apply and remember that that is a thing. I've done something similar where certain fights have affected him, maybe not physically, but more so even mentally, where you're just like, wow, we literally almost died there. That is a mental scar now. Even if I'm not physically scarred, I am mentally altered by this, where I'm like,
and the
I'm
issue
not
with
as willing
that,
to like whatever.
and the issue with that is you as a character can do that, and then the rest of the table is going to be like, but we won, so like next
Yeah,
fight.
I agree.
And so I think this gives a physical manifestation to the mental anguish that should happen when you fight.
I agree,
fucked up
but
shit.
it would only really be helpful because the people who, again, unless you have already that mental desire, they're just gonna
Most
look at this
people
and be
don't.
like, well, you're just punishing me now. You're targeting me and you're punishing
Again,
me for like no reason. And it's like
that's why we've prefaced all of this with the fact that you have to
Yeah.
talk to your players. And the reason I want to homebrew this into something that I think is more reasonable is that I think I can pitch that to somebody.
I believe it. I'd
Like,
be down to give it a try, bud.
Exactly. And I think you've played with people that, and like I've played with people that, like, I think I could pitch that to them and they wouldn't immediately be like, no.
Yeah, I'm down for it.
If I did it in a fair way. And so that's kind of the hard part with a lot of this stuff. It's this, as you were talking about me with honor and stuff like that, is like, this is all stuff that is, you have to pitch it to a group of players.
Oh no, you always have to be very aware of your audience and your player base and what's going on. Again, like we said at the top of this video, y'all, the two questions you have to ask is this rule going to improve your game, and are your players going to like this rule? Two very important things. On like, it should be about, again, and like we said at the top, you first have to probably identify what is your game. You know, what is the actual appeal and foundation of your game? Why is it that your players are here, still here? What do they enjoy about this game? That is how you're going to find the answer to those two questions on, is this going to make your game better? And are your players going to like it? What are you already doing well? What are your players already enjoying? What are they already, like, you know, getting into and feeling about it? Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be like open and maybe even intention to try and maybe add another element in that your players haven't experienced already, or something that's new. That doesn't mean that at all. You absolutely can do that, but just again, be open and aware to the reasons you're doing that. If you want to bring something in, and maybe it's because you're feeling like you're missing something from the campaign that isn't there, that you want to implement to maybe feel a bit, because you as a GM, it is also about you having fun. We've said this multiple times. It's not just the players. It is also you, because you are technically playing this game. Even as the GM, you are still a player too. And it's about everybody having fun. And if you're not having as much fun as you think you could be having, and you want to try this, talk to your players. And if they really are players worth having at your table, more than likely, they will be open to at least trying it. Again, you don't have to be like, if this is a permanent fixture, this is happening now. You can approach them and say, hey, you guys, this is a really cool or interesting mechanic that I was very much interested in trying out in our game. I think this could be a really great addition and try something a little bit new or fresh. I hope you guys are open to that. And again, if they're usually worth having, if they're really cool, they'll be like, yeah, okay, we're down to give this a try, you know, and then you give it a try. If it doesn't work for everybody, either try to like compromise, tweak it a little bit to maybe like offset or to help out maybe some of their grievances, or if necessary, get rid of it and try something else. That is the beauty of this game. That is the beauty of 5e and this whole thing, is that these are all variant rules. These are all homebrew rules that you can apply to try to make things a bit better.
I think at this point, I want to touch on the like action object, like the action options, combat options scenario, because these are more straightforward.
Yeah, these are definitely some other variations and other things that we can do.
Because I have a couple I would definitely want to include, but I don't know what you're kind of looking at.
For sure. Like I absolutely agree. Like there are a number of kind of things that I feel like variants to certain rules, applications, and mechanics that I feel like could make your game a bit better depending on how you feel about it. Like there are definitely things I have. Really quick though, we're gonna take just a short break real quick because I gotta pee super badly.
So we'll pause it here and we'll come back in a minute.
Yeah, we're gonna take a short little break and we'll be back in just a second for you. Okay. There we go. Now we're back.
Okay.
Thank you for waiting. It's just a short thing. I just had to go really badly. I was holding in for a minute and I was like, I gotta find a break in this conversation real quick to get going. But
So I
as
think
I recall, yeah, we left off specifically talking about some of the more combat oriented or other little like things that you can apply.
yeah, I think do you want to start off with I think one of your favorites that we were talking about before, which is the initiative score.
The initiative variant, yeah, that is something I kind of looked into a bit. I'm sure a lot of you, hopefully, potentially, are watching, are maybe familiar with a couple of different ways that initiative can be done. Obviously, the usual way, the way that I've normally always done it, is you have your people roll initiative, you roll a d20, you add your initiative score, which is your dexterity modifier, and any other whatever things. There is a variant rule that you can indeed apply, such as Sam just said, your initiative score. With this optional rule, creatures don't roll initiative at the start of combat. Instead, each creature has just a predetermined initiative score, which is a passive dexterity check, 10 plus your dexterity modifier. So for most cases, that's always just going to be like, either like a 13 to maybe like 15 at the highest, is what you will normally have. Now, by doing this, you cut down on die rolls, math. You cut down on both having to roll more dice, having to do math on the fly, and the process of asking for and recording all the different totals of each different initiative rolls. The speed of your game can considerably improve at the cost of an initiative order that is often predictable. So essentially, as it says, it's like this is just a way to like you just know who was always going to go first. You know who is usually going to react. Whoever has the highest dex is just always going to go first usually. And so you don't have to worry about waiting for everybody to roll and then do their math and everything to add it up and then add whatever and then take down all the monsters. And depending on how many players you have, that can get to be a lot, especially if you're having maybe multiple different like combats throughout the day. It's always have to take that moment to stop and do all this stuff. And it can bog down the game. I've seen it happen. It can happen a lot. And on the other hand, though, of course, this also, as it just stated, by making this more efficient and more just an instant, constant, same thing, you don't get that same kind of flavor of randomness on like who's going to go first and how is the situation, the battle going to change depending on whose dexterity or whose initiative roll was higher and lower. And if you just have a certain creature who's just like, well, their initiative is just going to be so much higher than everybody else, they're always going to go first. You know what I mean? Like, so there are positives and negatives to this particular rule.
I mean, I would say overall, this makes sense. You look at if anybody's played Divinity Original Sin 2,
yeah,
each character, each class, your spec abilities give you a default initiative in combat.
Yep.
And there are some things that are going to be higher than you, some things are going to be lower than you. Your different characters are going to have different initiatives. And it's that classic fantasy RPG trope of like, if you're not a dex-based character, you're going to go towards the end. If you spec into dex, you have a chance of going further, like further
higher up
in the initiative.
Yep.
Now, the reality is that the only fault I can see in this is that there are eventually monsters that have like 28.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're gonna have certain monsters that are gonna have like a plus, a +8 to initiative, and they're just always going to go first. Which again, in some cases, like Sam said, I think is almost because a lot of those monsters, to be fair, they're gonna be pretty mythic, powerful, legendary creatures. To be fair, that are like they are powerful.
To be fair, there isn't necessarily anything wrong with them going first.
Depends. Like
so, for example, obviously you'll be kind of fucked if you are an assassin rogue, where your first turn you automatically surprise, which means you automatically get sneak attack.
And not just that, you automatically crits, you automatically and if you don't go first, then you kind of just literally you lose that entire ability, which is one of the cornerstones. The reality
is that if you hit something that hasn't gone yet, you still get all of that.
True.
if something goes before you and then you decide to hit something else, then you're fine. The reality is that that's going to suck if you're fighting like one big monster.
Yeah.
But there is the opportunity of like you could still get the drop on it. So that also kind of gets rid of the like. So I don't know about you, and I think this is kind of homebrew. But if someone gets a drop on something and attacks and it actually goes through, I count that as like kind of in initiative.
Like in terms of if you have a surprise round. And
like for me, like if someone's like, I'm an like, for example, if someone says I'm an assassin, that's my archetype. If I hit someone before they go, I auto crit, auto advantage.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Well, for me, if say you're fighting a ancient dragon, which they have like a 28 dex or whatever. Let's just or like some big monster has 28 dex, you have 20 dex or 22 dex if you got a manual. So they're gonna go before you. But you manage to sneak up on it and hit it first once before the normal fight goes. There is no reason.
Well, yeah, no.
There's no reason to take away all that stuff.
Here's what I'll even say about that, and specifically because of the caveats and the restrictions of assassin. How even I would play it and rule it as a GM is I would be like, look. If you start a fight, but this creature, even if a creature goes before you, if it doesn't actually know that you're there or if it has not at any point yet identified your presence, I would still let you use your assassinate on them. Because because assassinate is really cool and the assassin class is cool. The only issue is that the way that they worded it and the restriction they put on it is really bad. Like how like that. It's so bad because it is so very specific and there's too many restrictions of it. And I get why. But at the same time, it vastly limits the situations where you can really let that class shine. And I love that class. And so how I usually rule it for me, and once again, this is perfect because it is homebrew, is it's like, look, you are an assassin. And if you're able to, if they don't know that you're there, if you're able to successfully hide from them and they're not able to locate you, even if you roll for initiative, because even in a surprise round, I usually like, you should roll for initiative because it's going to happen right after way anyway. So you might as well just get that going. But you essentially can take an entire round without them reacting, without them doing anything because they got caught. Now, obviously, if you have multiple people taking a surprise round, it's like that can be a little like I still will let people do it, but I'll usually be like the first time they get hit, they can then use their reaction after that. They're able, they can't use a reaction at first, but after that, if they get hit once, you can't all like simultaneously hit at the exact same time.
The reality is that surprise round only works on those who aren't seen. Like, so say a whole party surprises somebody. Technically, only the people who have rolled high enough stealth.
Well, that's the only time I really let a surprise round take place.
So like,
is if they have passed the perception or the stealth check.
So say like you have a rogue and a ranger, they're both really good at stealth. You also have a fighter and a cleric. Fighting the cleric, they don't roll high on stealth. They enter the building. The enemy sees them. Technically, the surprise round happens while the enemy is looking at the two other people as the rogue and ranger both let off attacks.
Exactly.
Now, I personally, I would let both of those attacks go through as a surprise with advantage, whatever the hell it gives you. But the moment you attack, unless you have Skulker, they know where you are. So even if you hit them with Skulker, they know where you are. So it's to me, like with this initiative thing, you have to be aware of the fact that assassinate the perk, you have to then allow it to work slightly different from what it says, because otherwise it's a veritably useless ability.
It's completely useless unless you specifically. It basically
is. It's only useless if there's one enemy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
If there are more than one enemy and the rogue rolls above any of them,
you can still technically do that.
But in my opinion, if the rogue is already stealthed, nobody knows that they're there. Whoever they attack counts as the assassinate target. And obviously we agree on this, so that's fine.
That's how I feel about it, because otherwise it's completely useless.
The idea of having just a set initiative for every monster, every person, and you know what? There is something to be said about the fact that it's like, oh well, some monsters they have like a 30 dex. Well, you know what? These monsters are so ridiculously powerful.
They should go first. That's what I was saying.
Like, no offense, an ancient dragon should go before your party.
Probably.
Unless they get the drop on it, and that's only one person that gets the drop on it.
Yeah, but it's like if you have like a literal solar angel, this motherfucker, like, he should go first, unless I mean, to be fair, I also like to play campaigns where I like epic campaigns where like your characters are super freaking beefed up and badass and powerful too. But at that point, your scores will probably be similar to them as well. And I could see how it might be like, okay, well, we can maybe contend with this thing depending on how we roll. And so I see both sides. Like again, a common reoccurring theme for me is I usually like simpler is usually better for the most part. And by simple, I mean roll for when it actually matters and when it really matters.
I don't like the idea of like, oh, we may be able to kill this if we roll well. I don't like that. I think that's garbage. I don't think that helps the game at all.
I think it does in terms because it does have those moments where it's not unrealistic. There are absolutely moments where you push past your feasible, realistic limits to do incredible, ridiculous feats of astronomical proportion. That is not an uncommon, maybe I shouldn't say uncommon. It is not an unrealistic thing to happen. It has happened in our world, in IRL. It can happen. I feel like it should still be allowed to be able to happen in this game, especially because you want to have those moments. Those are some of the best moments you could ever have. Where you're just like, oh my God, I did this amazing, cool, awesome, incredible thing that maybe I shouldn't even actually been able to pull off, but I somehow did. And that's a great feeling. And I feel like there should be room for that. At the same time, though, it does, like we were saying, in this particular regard, it has a capacity to sometimes bog and slow the game down to a crawl and a thing where you have to constantly just like, oh, I did the thing, but then I didn't do the thing, even though I should be able to do the thing. Like,
I think what I like more with this system is that if you're spec'd into initiative, whether that's Dex, whether that's your class, if you're like a swashbuckler rogue, whether it's a feat like Alert, you're putting in resources to go higher in the initiative round.
To be good at this thing.
So for me, I feel like if it's just a baseline, you are basically when you are rewarded for putting those things into that scenario, right? Like,
I mean, but technically speaking, you technically are, even when you roll.
I know. But I like this. I don't know.
I do too. I usually like just baseline stuff.
I think it's more good than bad.
But I mean, maybe. Like I said, for me, I'm kind of middle of the road where I'm like, because I do still like, in terms of initiative, because again, the biggest issue with this is that it's always going to be almost the same uniform initiative, and people are always going to can't take it and be like, okay, you're going to go first. Well, we know what you're going to do, so then we can do this thing maybe ahead of time. Like, instead of it being a little bit more varied and different, where you can be a little bit more, you have to be a little bit more tactical. With this, you could basically have to initiate the same type of tactics and ideas almost every time, where you're just like, okay, we're all going to go in the same order every single time.
I want to make a case.
Okay.
You fight with this, you're an adventurer. You have a very specific set of skills. You're Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
No, so you're fighting in a party. It's Liam Neeson, right? You're there. There's John Wick. There. No, I'm just kidding. But like each character has something they're good at, right?
Just making the Expendables now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Stallone's there. For some reason, Samuel L. Jackson's in the corner.
I mean, we know why he's there. Yeah, we know why he's there.
Motherfucker. No.
These motherfuckers think it's a motherfucking plane, man.
Yeah. Nick Cage is like in a porta potty 2 blocks down. But the reality is that, to me, I think there's actually kind of a value there, because the longer you fight with a group and you know how things kind of go, I think it lends itself to the fact that you're a team who's been adventuring together. You know what each other can do. I think there's actually value in the fact that I think people who don't normally think tactically will then start to think that way. And to me, that's a fucking godsend. I know for some tables, they don't rely on that. That's not what they really go for. But for me, if I'm looking at a big battle map and I have 6 people on our side and 12 people on their side, and these people are putting themselves in position to get hit by everything and their grandmother, it bothers me, because then they're like, oh, I'm going down, and I'm like, maybe you shouldn't have done what you did. And then they're all like, well, why won't you help me? And I'm like, because I don't care that you made that stupid decision. Because when I make stupid decisions, I don't expect anyone to help me. So I'm sorry, but like,
I agree. I agree and
like,
respect that.
so
I'm a
if
similar
you-
way. Well, I probably still would help, because it's like I'm like,
well, obviously, but like,
our chances of survival are better if you're just up. So I will do that. But I'm
like,
not happy about it. I get it.
if you have a group of people who actually care about the tactically semi-correct things to do, I'm not saying you have to make every tactical decision. There are emotional decisions that you should make within a D&D game. Not everything is going to be tactical.
No, it's all going to be always logical all the time.
If you're telling me that in the average fight you're not making any tactical decisions, then you need to find a different game. Maybe a game that doesn't have a game map, or maybe a DM that doesn't do any maps and it's all theater of the mind. Because something like this gives the opportunity for a team to work together. And not only that, get better at working together the longer you play together, because you're now familiar with how everything flows. And one, I think that makes combat faster, both in the fact that no one's rolling, and second, in the fact that everyone kind of plays off one another. So for me,
I said, I agree with that. My only caveat, my only issue is that has the risk of just making things incredibly repetitious.
It turns it into risk. It turns it into risk, and I understand that. You have to have people who are veritable in their like types of combat. People that don't always do the exact same thing.
Like for me, I also agree, because even when I'm playing, I'm usually like, if I have a high dex, I feel like you should go first too. Like that is also a feeling that I have, especially it's like
higher in the initiative.
Your reflexes are supposed to be honed and able to, like, so it's like, I am never a fan of like, oh, you're good at this thing, but then you roll low and then you screw it up. It's just like, I'm not a huge fan of that.
You know what high dex means? High dex means I have an opportunity to kill something before it kills or hurts my teammates who need a little bit longer to wind up. So you look at, I'm a rogue or a dex fighter or a ranger. I want to go at the top of the initiative order because I want to hit monsters before they have an opportunity to hit me or my more vulnerable companions.
Again,
right?
I will say, obviously,
whereas like a tank, it really doesn't matter where they go.
No, because a healer usually wants to go lower, and then
they just want to walk into somebody and stay there because they can take the hits. They don't care where they are. What I like about this scenario is it gives the opportunity for people who want to be the first contact, who are willing to draw aggro, do damage, or maybe take something out before they even have the opportunity to hit things like the wizard, the warlock, the cleric. People who don't have high initiative necessarily, or can't take as many hits. Maybe get some of the flack off of them.
You know what I would say? I feel like maybe instead of maybe just this baseline thing, like, maybe you could still use this, because again, I still think it's fair for certain creatures. Like, I don't know, after you get to a certain level, certain boss creatures or monsters are always just going to go first. I don't know if I feel like at some point they kind of should, but they also necessarily always shouldn't just be the case. Because again, if you have like a dragon, if you have some kind of like incredibly powerful creature, just goes first, it's just going to hit you with an area of effect attack. It's just going to essentially be almost free damage, because your characters will often just be maybe in like a pretty easily kind of lineup thing, which I feel like isn't necessarily fair.
So I would say, as a DM, you have to, I think maybe give them. So here's something that I will always say. When you're attacked by a dragon, usually they're flying at you. Unless you're in their lair, where you walked into their lair.
Unless you haven't confronted them, or unless you have surprised them.
If you confronted them in their own lair, you deserve to get hit with something. Because that is supposed to be difficult.
Not necessarily, because you are, if you are confronting their lair, then you most likely have done this intentionally, are aware of how dragons can fight and function, and are therefore well then should have the opportunity.
Let me just put it this way, right? You look at a dragon lair. the entrance to a dragon lair is going to be big enough for a dragon, correct?
Yep.
So, if you have people that you don't want to be in the original attack of a dragon, you fought a dragon before, you fought this very dragon before, the last thing you should do is march up in a fucking group to a dragon that can hit you with a cone. So, strategize. I think this rule pushes strategizing more than anything, and I think a lot of people who play D&D are not familiar with the concept.
Here's my point being in regards to that. As far as like strategize, I absolutely agree. The point being is like, when exactly are you necessarily supposed to do that? Because either would be one, if say for instance the GM forgets to ask the players like, okay, what's your marching order? How are you guys approaching? What are you exactly doing? If the players themselves kind of forget in that moment to be like, okay, we got through all this other stuff, we're getting to this point now, we're walking in this room, and the GM's like, okay, you guys see this dragon now sleeping, resting, whatever, or you guys like you're stealthing, like whatever you're doing. People don't like in this game, especially. It's like you're not always really constantly thinking about, okay, what is our current formation? What's happening now? It would be the GM's probably idea to be like, okay, where is everybody at, and also be feasible, like how you're doing this. This is why, again, having the more randomness for the initiative order is helpful to basically be like, okay, we're starting. I'm reacting now to break away so that we're not necessarily all in the same thing. That's why I feel again this would have to be tweaked a bit. I feel like there should be a little bit more flexibility with initiative in terms of like still having that ability to diversify, but still also, having that thing of being like, if you're good at this thing, you should be rewarded for it. And so for this, I feel like maybe it's like, what would be a good way to kind of maybe homebrew this a little bit more to fit kind of both sides of the equation? And if it's like, okay, you got a 10 plus, maybe it should always be like, what would be a good way? Like,
how do you feel about this? You have 20. If you have a 20 in Dex, so you spec full into Dex.
Got a +5.
You have advantage on initiative.
I like that. Like I feel like if you get to a certain level or a certain tier, you could probably have advantage on initiative. Or like,
let's be real, right? What is the barbarian capstone ability? You push
or beyond. Yeah.
You push beyond
strength and
humanoid limitations, right? So sitting at a 20 or a 22 or a 24, depending on how you increase your stats, you are the pinnacle of human perfection in that stat.
Yeah.
So who's to say? I mean, that would be, I think, because let's statistically speaking, advantage adds +5 to a roll. That is pure statistics, pure mathematics. So you have 20 Dex, which means your initiative is +5. You have no additives, which means with advantage, your initiative is ostensibly a +10, which by the bare minimum, I would say puts you above like a 13.
Usually. Probably, just usually speaking, that would be most likely.
It'll put you on average.
Well, your maximum is 25 that you could possibly get, technically speaking, if you roll, and so obviously the average of that would probably be around like 11 to 13.
11 to 15 technically, but at 15, like if everyone's rolling, it's not terrible.
No.
And I think your high end could beat some people. If you spec into initiative, you get like the +5 extra. That's +20. I mean, like that's +15 to initiative. If you play a swashbuckler, that could be up to +20. So like I think having initiative with an advantage if you hit 20 Dex is a good in between using set initiative scores if you want to give your players a better route. My thing with the set initiative scores, and this is just me as a DM, I think, like I'm gonna use the dragon example. Dragons are so egotistical, and a lot of monsters aren't immediately going to attack you. Like big boss monsters, there's going to be some sort of parlay,
or at least pontification. The ranting, the raving.
Like, to me, I would give my players a chance to move themselves one round of movement. Right? No spells, no additions to movement, nothing about that. But like, say you're in a 2x3, you're in a 6. You have 6 players. You're in a little 6. You're in a little 6 die of movement. and you walk into a dragon lair, and the dragon knows you're there because you didn't stealth, but you're fighting this dragon that knows you before. It's going to threaten you. Or, like, say you're fighting a mind flayer, it's going to talk to you first. Like, all these boss monsters, there's something there that keeps them from surprise attacking these people.
Well, it's almost it is kind of the stereotypical yet still I feel like almost believable flaw of almost any particularly powerful individual evil creature is, like you said, their ego and arrogance. They want to first impress upon whoever is currently facing or their adversities to be like, I am better, more powerful. This is ridiculous that you're even trying this. Like, a lot of them, and not all of them, some of them, I feel like there is room for debate to be like, some of them are just going to be like, you know what, screw this shit and just go right into it because they're done.
That's a different fight to me.
Sure, I mean, but even with dragon, if you fought this dragon before and you've actually wounded or hurt it, it's not going to take the time to talk to you anymore.
Well, then you're taking that risk going into the lair, but the reality is
I still feel like there should still be some amount of variable and variance in terms of like.
Well, there is. It's called stealth.
Even stealth can only take you so far, especially at higher levels with things. Unless you have very specific things or powers or what, like.
I don't know, man. I can roll at level 12. You can roll a 35 stealth.
But it's also about what is the probability of that happening? The probability, as well as, yeah, again, feeling like you have to be. I feel like, again, while the irony of this is that I'm a huge advocate for having just baseline like numbers and stats and less rolling. And this like one particular area I am advocating for like rolling because it is the thing that you and I talk about that we like, is that I feel like too much of the same static, like definitive like bonuses or applications will absolutely hamper the amount of potential like variance and ability to strategize and change your strategy, because it's just like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I feel like in this particular thing, initiative needs to have a little bit more of that randomness and diversity, because that is what keeps you more interested and involved with the game of being like, okay, I'm going first. Oh crap. What? I never go first. What am I supposed to do now? All right.
It's funny, Adam, because when you first talked about this, you were like, "Oh, this sounds great," and then now
I like it. I like the idea of it, but it needs to be tweaked, I think, to still keep that same amount of refreshing aspects to a certain encounter. But like I said, I think maybe it's like, for instance,
I think the 20 decks with advantage might do a lot more than we give it credit for. Like, I think that might actually change the tide.
It could. Bit. Well, I feel like they're, yeah. Like,
because like you spent the time to get to 20 decks, you spent the time to get there, and odds are most dex-based characters, if you have 20 decks, you're gonna want to go first. You're fast moving, you're
and not a lot of things give you advantage on initiative. It's true.
So I think for that, if you have 20 decks, you get advantage on initiative. I think is a good middle ground for not having set scores, but giving people the opportunity, if they go into that,
to succeed at what they're good at. I think I could get behind that. Like I like that.
Look, if you're me, you still get alert and you play.
Oh yeah, no.
You know, like you still do that, but the reality
I mean,
is,
I have to usually with my low fucking rolls. So, you know.
I think that's a good like kind of in between on that. I think that's about it that we need there. Do we want to?
So yeah, from here, as we kind of showed you guys, these are kind of all of the variant rules, again, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, specifically Chapter 9, that we like kind of wanted to talk about and show you guys, and maybe even apply a little bit of our own. Like, these are great foundations for homebrew rules. Like, and we've already gone over some of our other like homebrew. Like I told you again about like heroic crits. That's another kind of homebrew / kind of, I guess, maybe a variant rule for critical hits, where it's like, you know, you roll, if you get a crit, you automatically get just you double your dice pool, but you get you don't roll one of the dice pools. You just get the max amount of damage for your dice pool, and then you roll again on top of that, and then you add those two together. What are some other like homebrew rules that you and your group done, Sam, that you've done before that you like?
Well, there's the obvious, using potions as a bonus action.
Yeah, that's a very popular, technically homebrew rule. It is not actually normal. Like, you technically have to, although again, people can potentially make the argument about being like, well, item interaction, we could maybe like, because that's a whole other action of itself, or you should maybe be able to just use an item.
And like, that's the thing, it's just healing potions. It's not any other potions, not resisting potions, not spell potions, not any of the other potions. It's just healing potions. Now, does it make your party more powerful? Yes, because again, action economy is the end all be all of D&D 5e
combat. Yeah.
It was worse in 4th edition, but it's still pretty damn heavy in 5th edition. I think it's a pretty good way of playing. Personally,
yeah, I think it's fine.
Personally, like
spells that can heal as a bonus action.
That's so. Right. The reality is that your clerics will use healing word as a bonus action on many turns, and having certain characters, like there are a lot of fighting classes, both ranged and melee, that use their bonus action on a regular amount to do more damage, and so taking away that bonus action is still enough
or
of
even
the action economy
for spellcasters. Like tons of spells require movement, like teleportation spells. A lot of them are bonus actions. Taking away that bonus action to potentially heal, and again, not just that, it is still technically, a lot of time people still say it's an action to like feed a potion to someone else.
That's how we do it.
It's still an action to have someone else, like that makes sense. But I also feel like, again, I don't see how it could take an action to literally be like
it's not the fact, like, to give someone to someone else is an action, to do it to yourself is a bonus action. I feel like it's a fair way to do things.
It just seems logical, reasonable to me. Again, there's so many other things that heal you from bonus action. Spells, whatever else. There's no reason that a potion can't also be a bonus action.
It's the reality of you're creating essentially of a risk reward factor for kind of how everyone wants to do things.
It's still requires resources.
When you have people starting to get low, you'll have clerics who will start using cantrips as their action, which don't do a lot of damage and oftentimes don't even hit because they're save or suck spells.
Usually.
All of the cleric cantrips are save or
they're all
suck.
save or suck. Yeah.
And just for context, that means if the enemy saves against a saving throw, it does no damage, as opposed to
cantrips.
A lot of the attack roll cantrips, they hit and they do damage, or there are spells that if
they save, they take half damage.
Like
most leveled spells, but any cantrips, if you're doing an attack spell that requires them to make a save instead of you doing an attack roll, it is usually, as Sam says, save or sucks is the term that's like, if they save it, they take nothing. There's just nothing that they don't get half the damage.
You have a lot of healers who will save their bonus actions for healing word or other healing spells because they can't reach the people or whatever kind of thing is in their way. And so giving some of that bonus action autonomy to like a fighter or other melee classes where they can have one instance where and most oftenly it's not going to be a high level.
I was gonna say
at most it's gonna be greater, which is like
it's 44 plus 4, which
is not a lot of health.
Most people, and especially they have to still roll for it, which is another huge thing. Here's like a lot of people might make the argument that it's like, well, if you can bonus action heal with a potion of supreme healing, that's like 20 d4 plus 40 or whatever.
It's not. Like, supreme healing is not that big.
It is. Supreme healing actually is pretty big. Supreme healing is like, it's like 20, or is it, what is it?
Let me check.
I'm pretty sure it's like 20 d4 plus 40 or something like that, which is like that. That's a lot of health. But here's the big thing. Supreme healing is going to be so rare.
It's not. It's 10 d4 plus 20.
10 d4 plus 20. So yeah, half it down.
At the most, it's 60.
Yeah.
At the least is
30.
30.
Yeah, it's gonna be 30 because it's because if you roll ones for everything plus 20, it'll be 30. So you get 60 at the most and then 30 at the least. So like that's at that level, again, you're not gonna be getting those potions for a long freaking time. If you ever really do.
That's a very rare potion.
It's like, what is it? It's like 100,000 gold or something, if not more, maybe.
No, it's not even close to that.
500,000, something like that.
No.
Even more?
God. No, it's not even close to that. The gold in this game, don't
Yeah, yeah.
Gold in this game. Just
Point.
look at sane magic prices.
Yeah. Point being is like
But
these,
it's extremely rare, and like
and
even
you
if you
still
get
have to roll for it for the most
like
part. So it's
for
like,
example, the one you're going to come in contact with the most is the healing potion and the
and the
greater
greater
healing.
healing potion.
So healing is 2d4
2d4
plus
plus
2,
2,
which is either
4 plus 4.
10 HP at the highest or 4 HP at the lowest. So not great. A greater healing is 4d4 plus 4, which is either 8 HP, right? Has 4.
Well, 8. It's So at the highest, it'll be 16. It'll be 20 points at the highest,
And at the lowest, it's 8.
Yeah.
So even into superior, which I think is what you'll more commonly see in a campaign at higher level, is 8d4 plus 8. Now, 8d4 max is not. I mean, again, like it's not a crazy amount of healing.
No.
I mean, at the lowest, it's it's just not great. It's 20. Well, no, it's 24.
It would be 8d4 plus 8 would be it would be 40 at total.
At the lowest, it's 8 plus 8, which is 16, right?
Yeah.
So again, 16 health, not that great. The reality is like giving your fighters and frontline people and even like the people who do cast spells, the option to get back some health.
I mean, that's how I feel, is that these
as a bonus action
potions are primarily for and because it also takes a lot of pressure off of your healer classes to not just be a heal bot all the time, to give them a little bit more room to do other things if they want. If they want to be a heal bot, that's great because you can still give them more health. But this also is like, hey, some of your other players don't have to necessarily rely, especially again, if you want to throw stronger or more intense encounters at them, give them potions of healing and allow them to utilize them without it being like such a kind of huge cost at the whatever. It's like it's just more fun, in my opinion, to play in that particular way. I did want to touch upon some other like interesting action options in regards to talking about action economy. And these are variant rules and not just homebrew. But one particular aspect that I wish more games like apply, but I feel like they don't, is climbing onto bigger creatures. If you are fighting bigger creatures than you, I don't see any reason. Video games do this tons, where you're able to literally
Dragon's Dogma.
Yeah, Dragon's Dogma is one great one. Monster Hunter, another great one, where you guys are jumping on these. They are big. They're large, if not huge, if not gargantuan creatures. How are you telling me that you are not able to like climb up them, jump on top of them to then begin engaging in combat and fighting with them? So this particular thing, we'll just show right here. If one creature wants to jump onto another creature, it can do so by grappling. A small or medium creature has little chance of making a successful grapple against a huge or gargantuan creature, however, unless magic has granted the grappler supernatural might. As an alternative, a suitably large creature, large opponent, can be treated as terrain for the purpose of jumping onto its back or clinging to a limb. After making any ability checks necessary to get in a position onto a larger creature, the smaller creature uses its action to make a strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics check, contested by the target's dexterity acrobatics check. If it wins the contest, the smaller creature successfully moves onto the target creature's space and clings to its body. While in the target space, the smaller creature moves with the target and has advantage on attack rolls against it. The smaller creature can move around within the larger creature's space, treating the space as difficult terrain. The large creature ability to attack the smaller creature depends on the smaller creature's location and is left to your discretion. The larger creature can dislodge a smaller creature as an action, knocking it off, scraping against a wall, or grabbing and throwing it by making a strength athletics check contested by the smaller creature's strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics. The smaller creature chooses which ability to use. Like, that all sounds great to me. One particular caveat that I love about this, and that I really dislike in a lot of other things with GMs, and that it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is any check that utilizes like athletics for like in terms of movement or whatever can also be used with acrobatics. It can. For instance, this, if it's a check specifically to like maintain your balance on something, or even for instance, like to climb something. you can still use your acrobatics to help you climb things. Now, I don't think, like I said, you were trying to like grab onto something and hold onto it like tightly and keep it from like not moving, or keep yourself not moving in place. That is absolutely athletics. That is about you like using your strength. But if you're literally like trying to use your body to like climb up something and move across something, or dodge out of the way, or hold your balance on something, that absolutely can be acrobatics. Like these two things are interchanged for that reason.
I want to know, like, if I'm climbing up a building, there's no other buildings in the area. I'm climbing up a solid building on the side of it. There's like some like jutting bricks or like some handholds. To me, that is athletics straight and straight. Like there's no, you can jump off here and get leverage here and whatever. That is straight up athletics.
I disagree. I feel like you absolutely can use acrobatics for that, because your acrobatics, like, and I think we talked about this specifically in our stats, attributes, and abilities or whatever episode, is that like your dexterity isn't like, you still have to have a certain amount of control and strength to utilize your dexterity. Like that's, you're not just some like 100%. Dilapidated like whatever.
I agree, but like to me, if you're climbing up like a cliff face, that's not acrobatics.
I don't see any reason why, again, you can't utilize acrobatics. I feel like would be almost a use. Like, I feel like athletics would be, again, you're like staunchly, probably with just mostly your arms, like pulling yourself up, just almost blatantly straightforward. Whereas acrobatics would be more like, okay, I'm going to use my feet to like get leverage here.
Well, see,
to then push myself that way to then start moving. Like
that's where I disagree. I think athletics to me is not just arms; it's your whole body.
I mean, athletics is your whole body, but my point being is like, you're using just to stay forward, to like continue to push up.
To me, acrobatics is using the fact that you can gain leverage in situations that you wouldn't be able to. So like acrobatics would be doing like parkour, like jumping wall to wall, like in a Mario game. That's acrobatics.
Sure, right? Being able to jump. I mean, but again, scaling
people
could make the argument that you could use athletics for that. How could you not like jump off the wall, like if you're just super strong, to literally like go back and forth, because or even you don't, like, hold to yourself, like, and just go up that way.
To me, the reason I'd use first of all, if you have two walls close enough to get to each other to like hold, then that's different. But I mean, like,
I think you can use either one.
Yeah, that's fine. But if you're far away enough that you have to go between wall to wall, to me, that's acrobatics. That shows a dexterous application. If you are climbing a straight castle wall, there's nothing to drop, like to jump off of. There's no vantage.
Let me ask you
in athletics.
What type of training and whatever do you think a person would have to go through to get good dexterity?
So
is a person who doesn't have a certain amount of strength to be able to like throw, flip, tumble, manipulate their body in this way, do they not have enough strength to literally be able to hold on to something and climb and pull themselves up if they need to at least carry their own weight?
Yes, sure. In the real world, yes. But the reality is that if you don't make a separation between the two abilities, they both become the same ability. And that's where I don't like that. So the reason I separate it is
the point being is that it should be like it should be they're basically the same thing that accomplish basically the same stuff, which is,
but not always. Opinion. I don't think they should always accomplish the same thing.
No, I agree. I don't think it should always accomplish the same thing, but I think there are plenty of things that they both should be able to accomplish, specifically because you are speccing into this type of character. A character should not be unable to climb up a fucking thing just because they don't have strength to do so, because there is still strength in your dexterity.
I know, but hear me out. So you climb up a rope. Mm-hmm. Is that strength based or dex based?
You could probably make it both. For instance, if you want to get leverage, I'm gonna
tell you this right now.
Listen.
Climbing up a rope.
How many people have you seen? Like, if you're climbing up a rope, if they're not super strong, they're literally able to, once again, they wrap the rope around like their leg and their body to get leverage, to hold their themselves up, to not have all of their like weight on one particular part. Would you not say that that might be considered dexterity or acrobatics?
So that to me, climbing just a straight rope is athletics.
Absolutely, could be.
The reason I say that, and it's not acrobatics,
How
is that you're just, but hear me out for a second. You're
Okay.
just climbing the rope. Also, let's be real. Adam, do you go about your normal day wearing 40 pounds of armor?
No, not usually.
Okay. Do you go around your normal day wearing 80 to 120 pounds of armor?
Nope.
Okay. So at minimum, leather armor is about 40 to 50 pounds.
Okay.
So that's taking your normal strength based on your body type, adding about a third to a half of yourself, depending on how live you are. Sometimes more if it's studded, sometimes more if like depending on the design. The dexterous elements, I think, to things like climbing and stuff like that rely on extra vantage points and like extra use points. So you look at how like a monk can run on walls, or a monk can like jump between sides of buildings. They're close enough that they can jump between and get advantage. Whereas pure strength, climbing up a rope with pure strength, carrying 40 to 100 pounds of armor, is purely strength based, only in the fact that like you can't touch anything else. It is your pure strength to get up there. Obviously, the point of climbing a rope is that you can anchor yourself and give yourself time to rest. That's not dexterity. That's conditioning. That's anchoring yourself. So to me, you climb a rope.
Would it be constitution then?
No. Like when I say endurance, athletics is tied to endurance.
It absolutely is. 100%.
Running long distances, that's endurance. Guess what acrobatics isn't? Endurance. It's not. It's a separate thing. It's quick movements to get where you need to go quickly. The reality is that the longer you run, say, look at someone who does parkour. The longer you run, the less effective your parkour is going to be.
Sure.
Because you lose endurance. You don't go as fast.
Sure.
Dexterity to me is about quick movements, twitch movements, things that can happen in like 2-3 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas athletics is endurance. What are you doing for minutes? So if you're climbing up a rope, athletics is what I'm going to tell you. But if you're climbing up a rope in a well, you're climbing up a rope. I think you could either use straight athletics to brute force your way up that rope, or you can use acrobatics to move yourself side to side at vantage points in the well, at little footholds or handholds, to get yourself up with assistance from the rope. But again, that is a very specific use case. If you're climbing up something and there is no option to get a second foothold, to me that is athletics.
I agree. If there is no option, but that's why I specifically gave the example of there are plenty of people who have shown that, hey, if you might not be like super strong necessarily, there are a multitude of ways for you. Because I'll also give another example for you. What would you call a person who is an acrobat? Are they more athletic or more acrobatic?
Technically, obviously, by the term, they're more acrobatic. But
Wait,
Adam, have you ever done acrobatics?
Yes, I have.
Same here. Are you going to try to tell me it doesn't require a baseline of strength?
That's what I'm saying to you, Sammy, is that acrobatics does incorporate athletics.
I know,
Therefore, I'll let you go for a while. Let me go. Here's the thing. If you are an acrobat and you're able, again, to, at the very least, if you are acrobatic enough to move and to have your body move in these type of ways, you automatically have just a baseline ability and strength to, at the very least, control and maneuver your own body and weight the exact way that you need it to due to your training and conditioning, as you yourself just said. Therefore, I would absolutely say athletics and acrobatics cannot always be applicable to the same kind of things. But however, when it comes to traversal and movement, I see absolutely zero reason why it should, because you're not carrying anybody else. It'd be one thing if it's like, hey, if you're trying to carry somebody else with you while you're climbing, I would absolutely say it's athletics, because that is literally your strength being able to do that. It's not just your own body that you're manipulating. It's not your own thing that you have to like hold on to and deal with. But if it's just you, whether or not it be like you're climbing up a wall that you can find purchases and whatever, if you're holding on just from your arm alone, I might even make a case that might be athletics in and of itself. But if there are almost any kind of ways for you to manipulate your body to help offset your own weight and strength that you could apply acrobatics to, and being more dexterous, more quick, more ability to like move up surfaces and other things quicker than just simply athletics, because it is still applicable. You can't do any of that stuff with having a certain baseline amount of athletic ability and strength to move and do any of that fast or well or dexterous.
Yeah. I guess my main thing is like, if someone's climbing up a tower, say there's a wizard's tower. Think of have you ever heard of the sundial tower scenario?
That sounds familiar.
Where the tower emits shadow at a certain point at the sun, and it changes throughout the time of the day like a sundial.
Yes.
And what happens is that you can sneak up to the tower in the shadow.
And none of them will see you.
But so for me, it's a single tower. There's nothing to jump off of. There's nothing anywhere. For you to climb the side of this tower,
how would you climb it at all?
To me,
what would you use? Even with athletics, what would you possibly use?
So you would have I would say you'd have a better chance with athletics. Obviously, you have to use climbing gear.
At that point, you would literally have to be like, you are so strong.
Well, no,
like the Hulk. You can dig your fingers into that shit. I would say athletics would work then. Yeah,
you'd need climbing gear.
I don't see why you couldn't use acrobatics with climbing gear.
To me, there's nothing to give you a better purchase than someone who has brute strength. So to me, it's athletics. Now, if you're climbing there's a building who's 2 stories high, a building that's 3 stories high, and you want to get from the alley up to the 3-story building, that's 100% athletics or acrobatics. But a lone tower where you have to use ropes and climbing gear, and you have to give yourself purchase on this solid stone structure.
If you're strong enough 100%. To break through bone with dexterity weaponry and the like.
No, but that's not what Dex does.
Dex does do that.
No, Dex doesn't break through bones. It breaks through joints.
You can break through joints. I mean, not everybody is a rogue, okay?
I know, but like dexterity as a concept, it's supposed to be like a finesse.
Yes, I agree. My point being, Sam, is that it is not. Strength and dex are not mutually exclusive. That's what I'm trying to tell you. In regards to the game, they make it that way because it's like, hey, you can build out your characters and they want to emphasize them, but they're not mutually exclusive.
No, I know that.
Therefore, a person who is dexterous, again, has to have a certain amount of ability. Because it's like, again, what if, like, for instance, a person who is fast enough, because speed also equals force and also equals kinetic energy. In fact, speed is usually far more in regards to kinetic energy rather than actually just brute strength. The faster you move, the more damage you technically can do because you build up more energy that way.
Yes. But
so that being the case, I would say even more so, specifically because the thing is, like, you can still move and strike something that's pretty decent, especially if it's designed to do that. There's no actual reason, except for the game's mechanics and what they distinguish, that these two things cannot be interchanged with this particular activity, specifically climbing. There are plenty of other ways that these things are different.
I mean, climbing onto a creature, it already says you can use both. Grappling.
Yeah, but my point being is much of the things that you either use strength or acrobatics are usually interchangeable, which again, usually has to do with climbing. Much of them are. There's not a lot that isn't different, exactly because, for one, strength doesn't have any other stuff that it applies to except for athletics.
So, you know what? I want to give strength an opportunity to actually be useful.
And you do, because if a character is good in strength, chances are they're not super dexterity.
Exactly.
But you also shouldn't take away the ability for a person who's dexterous to climb up a freaking thing.
It depends on how they're trying to climb, Adam. I don't think that's wrong. I could physically.
There are very few scenarios or situations where these two things are truly mutually different. I already gave you a couple that I agree with, but there are very few. If at any point you are using any kind of equipment, if you literally have handholds to actually even be able to climb at all, there is no feasible reason why you can't use one or the other interchangeably in that scenario. Like I said, if you're literally pulling other people up with you, absolutely athletics. Because you're carrying more than just your body. It's more than just your thing here that you're doing. If you have literally, like, if you're hanging by like a single arm and there's like, no other purchase anywhere, for sure, I would say hanging on to something, like I said, is athletics. You're trying to just from brute strength alone hold on to something. But if there is in any way, shape, or form, like if you have handholds and you can use your feet even with athletics, then you can goddamn use your acrobatics as well. If you have any way of using your feet and your entire body in this scenario, you can use either athletics or acrobatics. There is no feasible reason why you cannot.
I'm gonna have to
just your upper body, sure. We can even say athletics for just your upper body. But if you got your lower body, you can use your athletics, your acrobatics too.
I'm gonna have to agree to disagree on this one.
Sure. I mean, you don't have. Again, I don't see any actual things that you were putting forth like I was to dispute what I'm saying.
Well, no, I said how I felt about it.
Okay, all right.
That's my dispute is how I look at it.
Sure.
We have different opinions on how we look at it. That's fine.
Sure. Whatever you say, but regardless, everybody, that in essence is kind of how we feel about like climbing, and especially onto like creatures itself. I feel like a lot of games don't utilize this particular mechanic enough, and I feel like they should, because they can make it way more interesting and fun. A lot of GMs will kind of just be like, no, I mean, you can't go into its space or you can't whatever, but it's like, well, but they're huge to gargantuan creatures. Like why could I not? Like what, like, can I try? And this right here, this ruling is a way for you to do so. There's another thing as well that I actually recently used in the game is the disarm feature. A creature can use a weapon attack to knock another weapon or item from a target's grasp. The attacker makes an attack roll contested by the target's strength athletics check or dexterity acrobatics check. And if the attacker wins the contest, the attack causes no damage or other ill effect, but the defender drops the item. The attacker has disadvantage on his attack roll if the target is holding the item with 2 or more hands. The target has advantage on ability check if it is larger than the attacking creature, or disadvantage if it is smaller. I use this recently in the game. It's really cool. It's a way of being able to be like, if somebody had like a crystal they were brandishing or holding, and I literally like kicked it out of their hands because I was a monk. And it's a cool way and a thing to remember that you can affect more than just damage or whatever in a combat or situation. There are a few other abilities. One that I did want to check on as well is cleaving through creatures, which again, I don't think anybody really does this.
I like this a lot.
If your player characters regularly fight, like this gives GMs an ability or the opportunity to give like hordes of enemies, right? Much more like, like army, or maybe not even army, that might be a bit much, but even like just big hordes or groups of enemies that are like maybe of lower level or of like lower CR. Essentially, when a melee attack reduces an undamaged creature to 0 hit points, any excess damage from that attack, and honestly, I would even say even a damaged creature, from that attack might carry over to another creature nearby. The attack targets another creature within reach, and if the original attack roll would be able to hit its AC, it applies any remaining damage to that other creature. If that creature was undamaged and is likewise reduced to 0 points, repeat this process, carrying over the remaining damage until there are no valid targets, or until the damage carried over fails to reduce any undamaged creature to 0 hit points. So again, I feel like I would remove the caveat that they have to be undamaged. I feel like that doesn't really make a lot of sense myself. And this also, again, just gives you more opportunity to potentially, like, kill large swaths of enemies. And,
I mean, the reason
makes your players feel badass. They feel awesome.
The reason you do undamaged is that you're focusing on one enemy. You cleave through it. You just happen to hit something next to it. I personally would stick to what it says. I understand why people would change it. It gets rid of the hunter, because ranger needs everything they need. It gets rid of the hunter ability to hit multiple creatures with every attack.
I mean, not every attack, because again, it's like it's very dependent on the level of enemy that you're fighting, as well as the fact, again, like this gives other people the opportunity to do that too. And the hunter still has, but by the ability that they can just hit everything in their area and attack multiple times more. And they obviously also have to use like a specific type of weapon, right? Because like for instance, if you use like certain spells allow you to do this with a melee weapon to hit like multiple key people in an area or whatever. It's like this. I feel like there isn't any reason that a barbarian wielding a great axe or great sword shouldn't already have a wider range of effect and hit with how big it is and how much force and the positioning that they have to take to swing it effectively anyway. Like, I feel like this is just a reasonable application to a creature who has like, I might say like, you probably have to have like a great weapon, like a two-handed weapon to maybe do this. Like maybe like I would say the max you could do it, you could only do it to one other person with like a light weapon or finesse weapon. Like you'd have to have a great weapon or a versatile weapon. You have to hold it with two hands to cut through more than just two people. I think like with a finesse, it would be like you can cut through one and then attack the other. And if you kill them, that's fine, but you couldn't go any more than that. It could only be at most two creatures. But for anything bigger or that you can hold with two hands, you could go through, 2 to 3, if maybe more, I guess. If you have creatures somehow in your range that are like all around you, you could do like a whirlwind attack. But I like that quite a bit as well. There are a couple of other things here. Like I feel like could you use this special to shove, force aside rather than run away? The attacker.
I mean, I like hitting cover.
Hitting cover is interesting. I feel like it's just a bit too much extra for not really that much extra added stuff.
Well, no, I think, I mean, I don't know if you use the cover rules where it like quarter cover is 2 AC, half cover
we
is
do that
5
usually,
AC.
or at least try to anyway.
So let's look at hitting cover. When a ranged attack misses a target, when a ranged attack misses a target that has cover, you can use this optional rule to determine whether the cover was struck by the attack. First, determine whether the attack roll would have hit the projected target without the cover. If the attack roll fails within a range low enough to miss the target but high enough to strike the target if there had been no cover, the object used for cover is struck. If a creature is providing cover for the missed creature and the attack roll exceeds the AC of the covering creature is hit. Now, the reason I like this is because it gives you the opportunity to protect smaller monsters with bigger monsters. It also allows for the fact that cover is meaningful. A lot of DMs just don't.
I agree. I usually implicate cover. I always usually apply cover, and I usually will also, even as a character, I'll be like, I'm gonna try and get cover behind this thing.
Like, because for context, half cover is plus 2 AC.
Full cover.
Well, is 3/4?
It's plus 5.
Well, then what's? Oh yeah, okay.
Full cover is you just can't hit them usually.
So half cover is 2, 3/4 is 5.
Yep.
Full cover is 0.
Yeah.
You cannot hit.
You can't hit them with full cover usually.
Now sharpshooter obviously gets rid of half and third cover.
Yeah, and 3/4, but obviously still cannot hit them through full.
No. And so the reality is like if you're taking cover behind some sort of Bastille or some sort of like man-made cover, there is eventually that stuff goes away if it gets by enough things.
It's true. I feel like it should have like an HP, an AC thing where it's like it eventually
there's HP for walls, there's HP for doors, there's HP for gates.
That's why certain monsters have the siege ability where they do double damage to structures and stuff like that.
You also look at like there's natural cover, things like large boulders and things like that you might not be able to. You know what? You might not be able to
grass, maybe like big grass. I feel like could still count, even though it doesn't stop it. It still makes it harder to hit you.
So I think the hitting cover aspect is good because it actually makes cover limited. A lot of, I'd say, large battles don't include cover, and they should. The fact of the matter is, I've had so many instances where I duck into an alley. And they're like, well, you're on the corner, so you can get hit. And I'm like, dude, they're 40 feet straight away from the corner of the alley.
They can't see me. They shouldn't even be able to see or hit me. Like I'm not like looking out or anything. Like I guess what I will say about that is, again, by the rules or whatever of D&D, it's like you're in a 5-foot space. And so technically, even though your character or creature doesn't take up the entire 5-foot area, like I guess they could make them okay, well, they're gonna wait till you to pop out and then fire at you or whatever. But that gets a little mechanically murky, I suppose.
So the reality with things like cover is that you have to have an angle. Think if you ever played like an XCOM style game, where you can get half cover or full cover. If you get behind full cover, they can't hit you unless they have an angle on you.
Yeah.
So that could be an acute angle. Like say you're here and they're here. They have an acute angle, which means they might be able to hit you, but you have a good cover.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, that would be 3/4 cover. If they're here, anywhere in like that area, before that point where they can still see you, they can't hit you.
They shouldn't be able to.
Unless they
anyway.
have something that has area of effect, which is a whole different issue.
They cannot directly attack you.
They can't hit you with a
technically
ranged
speaking.
attack.
Like they can't curve a bullet or an arrow around like and
Unless-
a 9-degree angle.
Unless there's a specific thing, there's the psionic rogue that can do that. There's a couple other classes that have specific things that can get around stuff like that.
Again, like I said, maybe my only caveat to that would be that if you are taking cover, then like again, obviously a square. If you have a gridded map and the square is like here, and like you're basically like you are hiding like you said right here in this square that's basically parallel with the wall, I would then say, okay, if you're gonna hide and have full cover, then you will not be able to then pop out and attack like while staying in that square. You would have to then move out of that square to then attack there.
The reason why getting full cover is so advantageous is the fact that you can pop out of it. The realistic part of full cover is that if you get full cover first, they have to then approach you to hit you at a better angle. And so for me, like you look at like strategy, you look at like actual warfare, full cover is a huge advantage.
Absolutely. It's a huge
and
thing.
So in D&D, if you take away cover as a thing, like full cover could be I'm hiding behind a tree that's my size. But if someone goes, say the tree's here, I'm right behind it, and they're here, they can't hit me. They go around to like here at like 3:00, I have half cover.
Yeah,
you know, like I'm automatically agree. I have cover, but not.
I mean, I suppose an enemy could hold their action to shoot you, like when you pop out to attack them, technically speaking. But then obviously, then they would lose like their second attack if they have it to do so against you. Like, so overall, like it's. I feel like the issue I have with it is that it has again the potential to be a little exploitative, where you're just like, oh, hey, I go here and I'm just going to stay here. But then I can technically keep my character in this square and then just peek my head out and then start firing. But the moment I'm not doing that anymore, I can technically say this is full cover, which then is like, okay, well, that, yeah.
You have to. So the reality is that if you're going to use cover, you have to be pretty straightforward about what that cover is. So like,
which is why
like there are a lot of things that people might say, oh, that gives me full cover, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like you look at like take like a sandbag embankment for like a light machine gun in warfare. That's not full cover. That's at best 3/4 cover, most likely half cover, because you can still shoot over it, but you have a less wide variety of mistake points. So full cover, you cannot hit them. 3/4 cover, you have to be extremely accurate. Half cover, you have to be pretty accurate, because there is a large, like about half of them are covered by something that you cannot shoot through.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are environmental factors to this if you're using certain kinds of attacks.
Or certain kinds of cover, obviously.
Yeah, and so there's rules to that, but I think for the most part, I don't know.
Again, a lot of this, as the theme of this is all variant rules and things that you can apply and things that we feel like you should try to apply. But obviously, in the nature of D&D, especially 5th edition, this is all optional. It's all optional, technically speaking. It all is. You can completely make up your own whole thing if you want to. These are just certain things that we feel like can bring a little bit more immersion, a little bit more flavor, color to your games, to utilize some of this stuff, to switch some stuff up or whatever. There are a couple of other things here that isn't as big of a thing. I think at this point, like we can go into again more of the actual like homebrew stuff. Like I think, for instance, I've made a number of homebrew stuff, like whether it be homebrew weapons, some feats, spells, and other things that I like my game to have. Like for instance, for us in our games, like a lot of the time we like to make it so that there are ways for you to increase like your ability stores easier rather than just leveling up. We like to basically be like, you can train to try and increase certain ability scores or practice, study, whatever it is to kind of make it better. We also usually like to make it where you can increase your ability scores above 30 or above 20 up to like a maximum of 30 if you can find certain items or boons or whatever that allow you to push beyond your normal limits. Like again, for my games, I like to run more epic kind of games and have more powerful homebrewed characters as well as the monsters and enemies too. I've brewed a number of I've homebrewed a number of monsters and enemy creatures and bosses and whatever else to kind of like have a little bit more bang for your buck, a little bit more dynamicness, a little bit more higher level play. What about you, Sammy? What other homebrew stuff do you normally like or that you think you'd like to implement?
So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing I've seen in a couple of different games. Is the critical skill checks
that now, you will succeed on or fail if you roll a 20 or a 1.
So me personally, I don't like these. It's a common homebrew rule. A lot of people don't realize it's a homebrew rule because they think natural 20 means ultimate success and natural 1s means ultimate failure. When in reality, natural 20 means crit in combat and nothing else, and natural 1 doesn't actually mean anything because critical failures are a optional rule / homebrew rule.
They're not actually a rules as written thing.
And critical skill checks is the connotation of if you roll a natural 20, you automatically succeed. Now, I personally do not like this.
No.
It's a common thing I've seen at a lot of tables.
Oh, yeah. Almost everybody does it.
Well, I have never, but a lot of people do.
That's what I'm saying. Like most tables and things seem to have that. Here's what I will say about it. It's like I do not agree that rolling a 20 should always equate to you automatically succeed. I think I'm pretty sure we talked about this actually in previous episodes where again we specifically dictated. I think it may have even been the stats, skills, and saves or whatever episode that we did, and that it's like there are baseline certain things that you cannot accomplish no matter how hard you try. Like it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter what you roll. There are canon, I'll even borrow from Across the Spider-Verse. There are canonical events or things that you can't just change simply by being the most charismatic that you possibly could be. Yeah. You can't just sway and change a BBEG's stance and opinions, thoughts, beliefs, whatever, just because you roll a natural 20 and you maybe even you had enough of a bonus to get to like a 35. Doesn't matter. A 40. Doesn't matter. Just because you roll a 20 doesn't automatically mean that you should succeed. Now, that being said, because you did the absolute best you could do, I do feel like that does mean that you should get something extra out of it. I feel like if you roll a 20, that is the absolute best. It's not often, especially if it's not often that you do that. I feel like you should get an extra bang for your buck. I feel like you should get some kind of bonus. Like I said, even though it might not change the BBEG to your side or switch it up, that doesn't mean that you haven't affected him in some way or made him think about certain things, you still have had an effect, I feel, in some way. Maybe it'll give you like a bump. Maybe he'll be a little hesitant. Maybe he'll have like disadvantage on a certain attack roll against you for a little bit of time or something because he feels like a little like moved or affected by your words or your attempt in some sort of way. Conversely, that's why I also feel like if you should get something extra for natural 20s, then you should get a little something extra for natural 1s. I feel like that's kind of a fair thing where it's like you did the absolute best you could do, and I did the absolute worst you could do. I don't feel like that should mean that, oh, you just failed, like something absolutely horrendous. Like, for instance, in one game that I played before that I call the cringe campaign, one of the other players in there, she failed. The GM asked for a random like wisdom saving throw or something, and she rolled a natural 1. And apparently for that, he immediately was like, all right, well, now you are now enslaved and subservient to this Duke of the Nine Hells or whatever the hell. Like without like just apparently permanently now. Like it was just a thing. And it's like that kind of thing is similar to like you succeed on anything with a 20 is not okay. That should not happen. You should not have that kind of repercussion and he's like, well, you rolled a nat 1. So it's like, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you rolled a nat 1. Yes, rolling a nat 1 should probably accrue a little bit extra bit, maybe like of embarrassment. I like, for instance, if I will even say like if a party, if you're firing like a ranged attack at a creature that's within 5 feet of like a friend of yours, you're rolling that one. I'm like, okay, roll another 20 roll another D20 real quick. And if your attack roll like gets above, like hits their AC, I'm like, well, maybe you accidentally hit your friend then with your attack at that point, because that is actually a thing that happens in real life, where it's like if two people are like fighting, kind of wrestling, moving, it's like, and you're shooting at them from far away, you have a potentiality to hit your friend because you're taking that risk. Or I'll say like if a melee fighter rolls a 1, it's like I'll say, okay, roll me like a dex save or an acrobatics check or something. If you fail it, it'll be all right, you fall prone. Like you're and a similar thing of like you're flat-footed, you fall prone, you have disadvantage on your next thing. I'm not gonna do some shit like, oh, you stab yourself, or oh, your sword somehow breaks because you roll a natural 1. Like that. It should never be things that are like, that is like super, that has long-term negative effects just because you rolled a 1. It should be something that's, again, you get disadvantage, you fall prone, you have these effects that you can apply and do these things, and I feel like that is fair, but in no way, shape, or form should it be like, just because, for instance, though, for saves, I almost never, I don't like to apply 20s or 1s to saves. You have a flat bonus. Even if you roll a 1, if your bonus is high enough to beat the check, you still save regardless. If your DC is so high, or just because you roll a 20, if you can't beat this save, then you just can't beat that save. Sorry, like that's just not like, I get it. In my only caveat to that, I guess, is like there are moments where it's like if a save is too high and they just can't beat it, it's like, well, then they're effectively out of combat. It's like, well, then usually you can have a friend maybe try and do something to stop it. There are ways of kind of getting around certain effects that are like, that last for a bit of time that you maybe don't have the ability to save from. I don't think that you should all like, yeah, like,
No,
I usually don't like to use them for saves. I understand why people might argue for it, basically being like, well, if I have to roll a natural 20, but if there's no way for me to get out of this hold person or this dominate person, like by any means, it's like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, well, like, if you're fighting a creature that had like, especially at higher levels, like, hey, you're fighting this thing, there are other ways for you to get out of this. Like at that point, I would just say, always make sure that there are other particular means or ways for your character or your players to get out of a certain thing if they're not able to just be, or if they have no way of really making the save.
Yeah.
Like that's all I would say about that, because that's what I usually try to do.
Yeah.
But in regards to that, why don't we go ahead? Let's take a little bit of look at some homebrew material like that other people have made on D&D Beyond, even because I've made like a couple of things. Like I said, I made some monsters, I made some feats, I've made magic items. One of the magic items that I really like, and it's very simple, very straightforward. I just felt it was one thing about magic items in D&D is that, or even just items in general about 5e, is that I feel like they're very limited in a lot of ways. They're very specific. I think we talked about this in our items episode, is that like, one of the items I love a lot are the flame tongue weapons. And usually flame tongue is usually all swords. They're all just swords. And so I was like, and they're all fire. It's all fire stuff. So I was like, you know what? I would like to make items that have this same kind of effect, but there are different elements and you can make them for whatever weapon that you want. So I basically I made like 3 separate things. And we call them like elemental armaments. For fire, I was like, they're called like blaze blessed weapons or armaments. For ice or cold damage, they're frost filled armaments, and then for like lightning, they're shock touched armaments. And you can basically be like, hey, this is a shock touched armament. It gets an extra 2d6 of lightning damage with a code word, and has another like some other effects to it as well. Like I basically gave it kind of an effect of like grasping hand, for instance, or shocking grasp, for instance, where it's like if you hit them with this weapon, they lose their reaction for the round. Either that, or it was like it gets advantage on enemies who have like metal, that they're wearing metal. You get advantage on the attack roll against them. Frost filled is like, I think not cone of cold, like ray of frost or whatever it is. The other cantrip, where it's like you hit them, their movement speed is reduced by 10 or whatever until the start of their next turn, or to the end of their turn or something like that. And then for Blaze Blessed, it's like, yeah, you can I think I put it where it's like it can function as like a light, like it sheds bright light or whatever, and that same thing. Basically, I gave him like different elements, and then maybe like a little bit of like cantrip bonuses that you get from like magic cantrips and stuff to give like maybe your mundane or your martial classes a little extra bang for their buck too. Those are some of my favorites that I made. As well as certain feats. Like I made one feat that I call overclock, where it's basically like you can take it at a certain level and it allows you to do certain things. And I haven't fully perfected it yet. I'm still kind of testing it a little bit and coming up with things for it. But it essentially allows you to kind of like, depending on your class or maybe even race, maybe it allows you to go beyond normal limits for a limited period of time to like do incredible feats. Like you can like concentrate on 2 spells at once, for instance, for like a maximum of like it usually halves the time of like a minute. Like usually it'll be like you concentrate on 2 spells, you can only do it for like 30 seconds. So instead of being at 10 rounds, it'll only be 5 rounds. But you can also like for a barbarian, you can be like, oh, barbarians can maybe push past their rage if you're trying to like cast spells or something like that. They can do that. Or maybe it's like they can use their rage to do other things if they have some besides just what it does. For like fighters, I'm like fighters get like they can like spend 2 uses of their action surge to get like to basically duplicate the effects of the haste spell. So they can basically like cast haste on themselves if they use 2 of their action surges instead. Like they spend those 2 action surges to then have the haste spell. Things like that basically is what I kind of came up with to give a little bit more versatility, diversity, and interesting stuff. We can go ahead and look at some spells or some feats. What do you want to look at, Sammy? I can take one and you can take the other if you'd like.
Are we talking just like the homebrew stuff?
Yeah, like other people's homebrewed stuff. Like we're gonna just maybe like go through some things, list some of it out. I think it's gonna be fun and interesting to kind of show maybe some bad ones, some cool ones that we might find.
Well, I went into like the magic items sorted by like the best rating, which is funny because like 3 of them are Matthew Mercer,
of course,
from years ago. Let's look at this one. What's this one? Oh, this is cool. This is like the Blinkback belt from. This is a wondrous item that's very rare, called the Belt of Returning. A finely crafted dark leather belt with 3 loops, each decorated with a shard of sapphire. The magic belt leaves an invisible mark on the surface of the weapon stowed in each loop and invisibly inscribes the name of the item on the sapphire shard. 3 one-handed weapons with the thrown property can be attuned to the belt. When a weapon from the belt is thrown at an object or creature, hit or miss, the weapon will return to the belt at the end of your turn.
Yeah, I think specifically Vax. He
had the Blinkback belt.
Yeah,
which was a 3.5 item.
Yeah. I'm looking up a feat here. It has minus 22 points for its rating. It is called ACE Protocol. The flavor text is Aasimar Cerebral Enhancement. A mad scientist obsessed with the Aasimars has created a cerebral enhancement to try and recreate an Aasimar from a human. It is flawed, but it is very powerful. To take this feat, you must be a human. You cannot be an Aasimar. 1, you are immune to radiant, necrotic, and poison damage. 2, you resist slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing attacks. Just all of them. 3, you are vulnerable to attacks from magic and magical weapons. Okay, so I guess it is just normal damage then for bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. 4, triple your health. This bonus is added after health is calculated and continues to apply as you level up. 5, increase your wisdom and charisma by 6. This can go over 20. 6, once per day, you may use a bonus action to heal back to full health. 7, you learn the Celestial language. If you did not have it before, you can read, write, and speak Celestial. And finally, 8, you have 200 feet of dark vision, and you can see clearly in the dark as if it were bright, clearly seeing colors. That is bonkers. I don't understand. Like, that is exceedingly unbalanced. Like that is, I don't understand how anybody would think that is like, and I don't want to throw too much shade at the author or nothing, but like, good Lord, like that, you can kind of see now why it might have, it actually has minus 25 total, but plus 3 votes. Like that's, boy, yeah, that is exceedingly busted. Let's see, what else we got here? Some of the worst. Let's go with minus 25. This one has what? 18. Jeez. There's just so many things that are like, wow, this is not good. Oh, this one has 56 points plus. This is AIR, Adam's Intellect Rule. Hey, look at that. Thematically on point. Adam's Intellect Rule. You gain a pool of intellect points equal to your intelligence modifier. You have the ability to spend these points once per session to offset the intelligence disparity between the role player and the character with the high score. You can't all be geniuses, right? Example, a character's intelligence score of 12 or 13 gives you a +1 modifier, which in turn gives you 1 intellect point to spend per gaming session. Each point is recovered at the beginning of the next gaming session, not through short or long rests. These intellect points can be spent in use for 1, intelligent assist, assisting another with a skill you are not proficient in to give them advantage on their roll. 2, a GM give me. Once per game session, your character is smarter than you, the player, and sometimes you need to think your way out of a scenario. You can spend 1 point during a scene to garner information that would be otherwise unavailable to you. This is GM discretion, either in the form of a hint, clue, or possibly a simple answer. This is not a check or roll, however, as by spending a point, you'll receive some form of information. 3, recall of import. Once per game session, if you and your party of players/characters can't remember an important detail like the king's favorite food or the location of the secret thieves' den tavern, spend a point to recall that information and remember to write it down this time. 4, add to skill roll. When making a skill check for a skill your character is proficient in, you can spend up to 1 point per roll to give yourself a temporary +2 to this single roll in order to increase your chance of success. This works for any skill you are proficient in, as your advanced intelligence has honed your ability to master these skills. That's interesting. Although I will say, I feel like a lot of these things are already kind of garnered by other stuff. Like, I feel like the intelligent assist, that is just basically like the help action. I do like the fact that it's like, oh, well, if you're not also proficient in this, and you may not be able to help them with it, and so by using this, you can maybe do that. But I feel like also like the GM give me once per game session. I feel like this should still just be a thing where it's like, if your character already has a certain amount of intelligence, or even if you maybe just forgot, your GM should just tell you the information anyway. I feel like it shouldn't necessarily be a thing that you have to like do a lot of the time. Or even like, again, if a scene like our information, it's like your character again, the recall of import / the GM give me. I feel like that should just be like, I can make a history check to do that. Although I guess with this, it's just like you don't have to make a check. You just get the information regardless, which I guess is like maybe okay. But it's interesting. It's got plus 56, which is a decent amount for sure. Like that seems pretty great. Any other ones that you wanted to check out or look at, buddy?
Not particularly. Like I'm looking through the kind of poorly rated magic items, and a lot of them just seem to either like give you something that just doesn't make sense, which was obviously used as a excuse in a campaign to do something, or they're just nondescript items that like give you a non-measurable bonus.
Yeah.
It's like, it's weird. I've dabbled with making homebrew items and stuff like that, but most of the time I just kind of tweak things that already exist just to keep it within the element of like understandable.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, I'll put this towards kind of the video for an aspect. I don't tend to completely homebrew things like items or monsters or stuff like that. I usually take something that I can base it on loosely.
Yeah, I
You know?
usually work from a template for a lot of stuff, like where it's like I take, like I said, for the elemental armaments that I made, I literally just took the same basic thing from the flame tongue, like the effects of the flame tongue, and then I added like some extra cantrip effects to make him a little bit more diversified and have some extra little bang for your buck. For I have like homebrewed certain monsters just from scratch because I found them interesting, but I did still like use a template of like this type or this level of tier of monster where I'm like, okay, this is how many hit points that roughly usually has, or this is the type of like the amount of spells or whatever. Like, yeah, obviously,
this is the damage it does.
Yeah, it's usually best to build from a template like that, so that again you would still at least have some semblance of balance rather than some of these things. Like I'm looking at, like I have looked at this one creature. I'm looking at like creatures now, specific or monsters that have been made, and it's called Anlin's Draco Lich form. It has an armor class of 25. It is a CR of 30. It's a CR 30 creature. It has 800 hit points, flying speed of 40, or sorry, a walking speed of 40, climb speed of 40, and a fly speed of 100. It has 30 in every single attribute. Is proficient in almost every skill, or as almost every saving throw except for strength and intelligence. Is immune to acid, fire, and psychic, and bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from metal weapons. Immune to the charm, deafen, frightened, grappled, and paralyzed condition. Has blind sight to 60 feet, dark vision to 120, and a passive perception of 30. It can speak Common and Draconic and all other languages, which is kind of strange. Has spell casting and is an 18th level spellcaster. But its spellcasting ability is intelligence, and its spell save is 20, with a plus 12 to hit with spell attacks. And has up to 9th level spells. Has resistance to turn undead. Has purple flames for its breath weapon, 120-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a DC 26 dex save, taking on average 100 psychic damage or 28 d6 psychic damage, or psychic and fire. So it's psychic damage, but since it says fire damage on a failed save or have as much damage, it might be he may have meant to just say psychic. He also has a bonus action called Scale and Force, and the dragon uses a bonus action to reinforce its scales and add 1d4 to the dragon's AC, but can only be used 4 times. He also has a reaction called Light to Doom. The dragon can take a reaction to replace any healing spells with poison. The poison healing has to make the person healing has to make a Constitution saving throw of 20, or take 5d6 plus 10 poison damage, and the healing spell fails. And it doesn't have any range on it. You can just do that at any range, and as long as it has a reaction, it can just do that. They have 4 legendary reactions. The usual for kind of dragons or whatever. Although apparently its wing attack now, each creature within 25 feet of the dragon must succeed on a DC 27 dex save, or take 7 points of bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. And then it can fly up to half its flying speed, which would be 50 feet. And now it also has mythic actions. It has the last hooray, but I think he meant the last hurrah. Which is cost 2 actions, can be used when under 100 health. The dragon eyes close as purple energy flies around the dragon, and it focuses all of its energy and strength on one form. The dragon gets a plus 10 damage on every attack, including successful saves, and a plus 8 on saving throws. And the dragon's AC gets round up or gets set to 30. So
yeah.
That's, I mean, it's definitely not the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But that's not great. Like that's a lot. It's had over 935 views. and minus 5 points to it. I mean, that's a lot, bud. So as you can see, you know, certain homebrews can maybe get a little bit crazy and ridiculous, which isn't a bad thing. It can both be crazy and ridiculous in good and bad ways, but there are a lot of things that are just like, wow, that's not awesome. Like not even really sure what to do with that.
I tend not to mess around with the D&D Beyond homebrew stuff, only for the fact that if I'm going to be doing anything, I'll try to do it myself based in the rules within like a general thing, but I can't.
Yeah, like I got another one here for you. This is known as the Tyrant. Medium humanoid, any race, lawful evil, armor class is 20, hit points are 1,076. Has a speed of 30 feet, but has 30 in every ability score. Saving throws are strength, dex, and wisdom at plus 19. Athletics are +4 and deception are +4 for some strange reason. Didn't do the math on that one, I don't think. He has a passive perception of 10, which again, didn't do the math on that. His actions, he only has one action, and it's known as Kill Burst. It has a ranged spell attack. It's a +700 to hit, and the target is just automatically killed if it hits.
Yeah.
And he's spelled automatically wrong.
Yeah, as you can see, as we've talked about homebrew stuff before,
it's a minus 20 points.
Yeah, as we've talked about before, don't trust random people on the internet to do your homebrew stuff. Do your research. Take what you will from certain people's opinions, including ours. Obviously, we're not the end all be all of these opinions, and turn them into things that you think would be fun or you think would work. And there's no like, there's also the concept of homebrewing things very small amounts. I love the idea of looking at a monster in the monster manual and saying, well, I want a weird version of this, and changing 2 of its attacks, or changing how it looks, or changing how it acts. And I think, to me, homebrew like that's very like small tweaks and things that you think would make something work better, is way better than just changing swaths of gameplay or adding some bullshit magic item you see from the internet.
It depends. Like again, I feel like it all, obviously, Sam said, it all depends on the game that you want to run, right? You can make like complete utter changes, but at that point, then I probably have to ask the question. I'm like, why not just play a different game then, or why not just make your own game entirely then? Really, because that's basically what it is. And there's nothing wrong. Like maybe you're even doing it, like we just said, building from a foundation, right? You're using 5e as your foundation for whatever you want to play, and that's great. But like Sam said, I also agree. I feel like a lot of the time it's a little bit more fun and interesting to try and tweak and build within the foundations of what you're doing here, because this is the game you want to play and you want to try and do this stuff. You want to do this stuff. There's so much that's already been made for you, which is great. I am a fan though. It's like if you do want to just make something brand new, that is super cool too. But obviously it takes a lot more time and a lot more communication and cooperation from yourself, like from you and your GM if you're not the GM, and then even for your players as a GM if you want to try something different. And obviously, before you go into any homebrew type of thing that's like maybe something completely new, you should at least do your best to have a decent grasp of the baseline mechanics and aspects of the game. Because, for instance, like this homebrew we just read, here's another one for you. It's called Atlas. It's a huge celestial, a titan. Any lawful alignment. It has an armor class of 24 metal, hit points of 600, a speed of 60 feet, but then a walking speed of 100 feet. A strength of 20, dex 15, con 23, intelligence 22, wisdom 26, and charisma 28. Its senses are just blind sight. No range, just all range. Languages, it specifically says all knows, all due to him knowing all things. Atlas Wrath is apparently a thing it has. When you attack, roll 1 extra dice. When you are blinded, charmed, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, all the conditions, then one other player becomes the same condition, apparently. Its actions are phase beam. When used, it does 2d20 radiant damage. So it just hits. There's no roll. Sword attack. melee weapon attack. It's plus 12 to hit, reach of 10 feet. It can hit 2 targets. It does 2d12 plus 8 radiant damage, and it has a bow, plus 18 to hit, range is 200, 400. Like this, all of this shit, you know what I mean? Like all this shit is like, that's not great. This is not awesome. It's got lair actions, all other stuff. It's got a minus 38 points on D&D Beyond. Again, it's cool. You want to do cool stuff, you want to make cool stuff, but just do your best. Like I said, it's probably best, like Sammy also said, build from a foundation. You can make your own entirely like homebrew creature who has their own motivations, flavor, whatever, but it's always probably best to build from a pre-established, pre-made kind of thing within the confines of the game to at least have some semblance of reference for balance.
Yeah, I mean, my
counters.
favorite thing is to look at what you want this CR creature to be.
Yeah.
And look at other creatures within that CR and look at like the differentiating stats, differentiating abilities. You know, look at like couple CR above, couple CR below. What changes? Is it just hit points? Is it just attack types? Is it just
proficiency bonus? Your bonuses, like
because some creatures, you'll have creatures that are higher challenge rating but have less HP.
Yeah, or
but
lower CR features, but they're way more dangerous in a lot of ways. Like the little abilities do way more damaging stuff.
So look at kind of what each creature does at certain levels of the game, and then throw yourself into the what does my creature do? What is my item?
That is what I was gonna say. What are you looking to accomplish with this creature?
Yeah, and that goes the same with like homebrew spells, homebrew magic items. Like, what is your special thing you want to happen here? Is it within what's already happening? Like, is it comparable to another item? Is it comparable to another spell? Is this something you're trying to tweak, or is this something you're trying to make brand new? Because I think a lot of that stuff affects game balance in such a way that is dangerous if you're not careful.
They specifically preface that at the top of chapter 9, whereas it is specifically like, hey, you should be very careful about implementing any new rules or any new stuff to the game if you are not confident about, the balancing and your ability to manage and mitigate the consequences of doing so. Like, that is just how homebrew works. Like, and I want to kind of end off here and with emphasizing, I don't think we can say this enough, is like, homebrew is homebrew for a reason. You brought it in, but you can also take it out if it's showing to be too much of a detriment rather than a benefit to your game. Okay. If you brought in a weapon that's like super uber powerful and it's unbalancing all your encounters, don't be afraid to take it away. Sam has told you about a couple of instances where he's had to do that kind of thing, where he's experienced that kind of thing, where it's just like this weapon, this item, even though I don't think it wasn't homebrew, it was still something that was more powerful and it offset the balance of the game. Homebrew has a vast menu to do that, and I feel like everybody should be much more open and flexible with the rules. Like, which is ironic, kind of coming probably from me and Sam, who can be self-admitted rules lawyers to a certain extent. Like, there are certain confines and aspects of the game, but I think it comes back to what we just said, is there are foundational pillars of the game and of aspects that we always feel like should always be applied and followed to a certain extent and built off of and from those. But those should be maintained and held in terms of like, this are core concepts and aspects that make the game fun and what it is, and keep it that way. And if you start kind of throwing those around all willy-nilly, things can get very messy very quickly.
Yeah, which is the end all be all of like, hey, don't just willy-nilly add things in. Don't willy-nilly like
be aware, be conscious.
It's the kind of thing of like, if you went and played a video game where the people who made it had no idea, no attentions paid to any kind of balancing, any kind of care, that gets very frustrating. And it's the same way when you introduce things into a game or just make things work a different way that has no attentions paid to what that would do to the collaborative storytelling game that you are playing. Because before everything else, it is a collaborative story. Power fantasies aside, It is a collaborative experience.
We're working with your people and your team and your group here to make an experience for all of you to enjoy. That is the intention. And again, like Sam said, you know, I've been through a couple of specific things where it's like GMs have switched stuff up on the fly, whether it be mechanics, whether it be stats or whatever rules, whatever else, and it's never fun. So before anything you do that's new, always talk to your players first, establish an understanding of expectation for how things are going to progress and what you can expect and do, and then go from there. Because homebrew, again, I think we've said this multiple times, this is one of the funnest, coolest aspects of this game. Whether it be multi-classing, whether it be homebrewing items, backgrounds, features, spells, creatures, characters, all that. The creation, the flexibility, and the freedom of imagination and application of imagination is what makes this game so amazing.
It is. And that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah. I'd say that is, in essence, the point. And the reason why we play this game. And that is at its core homebrew. So yeah, you know, I think that's probably about all we got, unless you got something else, Sammy, at all.
No, I mean, you know what? There's always going to be more homebrew things to talk about.
There always will be.
I think there's always, and I'm going to urge people who listen to this, whether it's now, in the future, whenever, if you hear someone talking about some new homebrew rule they saw and they want to implement it at your table and you're the DM or another player at that table, I urge you to hear them out, but with trepidation. It's never the whole adding things to games and changing how things work intrinsically or adding new mechanics to something is something that you all as a group have to understand, work together on. And honestly, a lot of the homebrew things that have happened in my games, which has been, you know, kind of a difference to you, Adam, which is a very closely knit group of the same people for now 7 years, is that we all have to agree. You know, it's something that like we all come together for, and is like, yeah, we all kind of think it should go that way, or we all don't like this, or, you know, if enough of us have a problem with something, we bring it to the DM and maybe something gets changed because of it. And so I urge you not to quickly jump into something without reading and giving it your own thought. I think a lot of us like to, and me included, I'm going to be a victim of this as well, is that we look at something online and we're like, yeah, oh my God, that's crazy. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. And we don't think about it or actually look it over, you know, with a prying eye to see if that really realistically makes sense. You look at, like, we were talking about the injury table early on. I loved it. When I first looked at it, I was like, yeah, this is perfect. And as I've continued to think about it and look at it and talk to other people, including you, Adam, is the fact that like there are definitely ways to grow this and change this.
Oh yeah, for the better,
especially to a specific player base that can all get on the same page with it.
Yeah.
Using these things, especially the ones in the book and some of the like more, if you look up online like homebrew 5e rules, you can find a lot of like widely used rules. There are widely used, well followed iterations to a lot of the basic rules in this game. There are also ones that are more kind of in the wings of things, have not been acknowledged, have not been widely looked at or kind of thought about. And if you find something that's interesting to you, think about it, write it down, look at it, actually talk to other people that you're playing with, because maybe they have an opinion that'll enlighten you on some aspect of it. Test it out. Do a one shot. See if it actually works.
Experiment. Live a little. You know what
because the reality is you can always take things away, but you can never, you know, you can never like completely get rid of what D&D is. It's a collaborative storytelling game. If you are adding so much that it's ruining your experience as a DM or a player, then you need to do something about that and change it back or tweak what you've already added.
Well, and the irony too is it being like, you know, for me, like I said, is the irony of it is like I'm a huge advocate for just make things simpler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like make things simpler, a little less math at times, a little less rolling at times. Like I'm a huge proponent of like do this stuff when it's truly necessary. And again, maybe it isn't ironic because it is about again having fun. Do this stuff when it would be fun to do it, not when it's like, oh well, we should do this because da 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 da. And to be fair, the concept of what is fun and what isn't fun is very subjective for everybody, especially in this game. There are plenty of people that love to play this game in certain ways that we probably don't think is fun, and maybe there are a number of people that don't necessarily like the way that we play the game now, the way that we think that it would be fun to play. And there's no objectively wrong way to play the game, technically speaking. There are probably worse ways than others, but either way, at the end of the day, like Sam said, it's a cooperative storytelling game with your friends or people that you get to know to have fun and make memories and experiences that you will recall for the rest of your life and enjoy, you know. And homebrew is one of the best ways to do it, and it's just about having an open mind and positive communication with people, and it can be a great exercise in that, in my opinion. But yeah, you know, unless you got something else, Sammy, I think that's about it. Thank you guys.
That's all I got.
We got this has been another long one for sure. It's gotten pretty heated at points and moments too, which has been great. We hope you enjoyed and stuck with us as long as you could. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, y'all. As always, we'll see you next time when we dive back down deep into the archive. Bye-bye.
Bye.